Time to start. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Appropriations Committee hearing. My name is Rob Clements. I'm from Elmwood, representing Legislative District 2, which is Cass County and Eastern Lancaster County. I serve as chair of this committee. We will start off by having members do self-introductions, starting with my far right.
Steve Erdman, District 47.
Lauren Lippincott, District 34.
Anna Wishart, District 27.
Mike McDonnell, LD5, South Omaha.
Robert Dover, District 19, Madison County, south half of Pierce.
Myron Dorn, District 30.
And some senators may be coming and going. That doesn't mean anything regarding your issues. It just means they probably have a bill in another committee, which I do in a little while. Assisting the committee today is Cameron Hunt, our committee clerk. To my left is our fiscal analyst, Clint Berner. I know you, Clint. And our page today is Kate from Kansas, a UNL student. Is Malcolm here?
It's the way to get chairs.
And Malcolm is getting chairs. At each entrance, you'll find green testifier sheets. If you're planning on testifying today, please fill out a green testifier sheet and hand it to the committee clerk when you come up to testify. If you will not be testifying but want to go on record as having a position on a bill being heard today, there are white sign-in sheets at each entrance where you may leave your name and other pertinent information. These sign-in sheets will become exhibits in the permanent record after today's hearing. To better facilitate today's proceeding, I ask that you abide by the following procedures. Please silence your cell phones. Move to the front chairs when you're ready to testify. The order of testimony for bills will be introducer, proponents, opponents, neutral, and closing. When we hear testimony regarding agencies, we will first hear from a representative of the agency. Then we will hear testimony from anyone who wishes to speak on the agency's budget request. When you come to testify, spell your first and last name for the record before you testify. Be concise. We request that you limit your testimony to 5 minutes or less. Written materials may be distributed to the committee members as exhibits only while testimony is being offered. Hand them to the page for distribution when you come up to testify. If you have written testimony but do not have 12 copies, please raise your hand now so the page can make copies for you. And now we'll begin today's hearing with Agency 18, Department of Agriculture. I see some hands raised. We'll be getting to you in a minute. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator Clements, and hello to the Appropriations Committee. My name is Sherry Vinton, SHERRY-VINTON. I'm the new director at the Department of Agriculture, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify on the preliminary budget for Agency 18, the Department of Agriculture. I support the governor's biennial budget recommendation for the fiscal year 2023-2024 and for fiscal year 2024-2025. This results in an increase of approximately 4% in 23 and 24 and 1% in 24 and 25 over our current base appropriation for all fund types. The governor's budget recommendation includes a one-time purchase in the fiscal year 2023-24 for the Food and Dairy Laboratory, which accounts for 2% of the overall increase. This requested appropriation is for $435,000 in general funds to purchase equipment to replace old lab equipment. The Food and Dairy Lab is accredited by the International Organization for Standardization and is a member of the Food Emergency Response Network, which ensures that the lab is always ready to test in the event of a food emergency or outbreak. The Food and Dairy Lab performs the crucial work of keeping food and milk safe in Nebraska by testing over 11,000 samples each year. The lab equipment needs replacing as it will no longer be serviced by its provider at the end of this calendar year, and having equivalent equipment is necessary to maintain accreditation. Maintenance for the new lab equipment is already realized in the current budget. The governor's budget recommendation also includes a requested general fund appropriation increase of $52,000 in both fiscal years for an animal health program software conversion. The appropriation would allow the department to implement Core One, a software utilized by many states for keeping animal health records, which would allow the department to be more responsive in the case of any animal emergency. The current system for animal health records is outdated and inefficient. We've included more detailed information regarding the lab equipment and Core One software system appropriation requests in our written testimony, but I'd be happy to answer any questions specific to these requests at the end of my testimony. I'd also like to highlight some of the wide-ranging programs within the department that serve our industry partners and the public. The department promotes agriculture by working closely with farm and commodity organizations, public and private research institutions, and other agencies to open new domestic and international markets for Nebraska farm commodities and value-added agricultural products. The department also contracts with 11 commodity boards for administrative services. 4 of those boards are realized within our agency's budget: grape and wine, craft brewers, potato, and poultry and egg. The other 7, wheat, ethanol, dairy, dry bean, corn, grain sorghum, and dry pea, are their own separate agencies. The Food and Dairy Program inspects over 7,000 food operations such as restaurants, grocery stores, food processing plants, as well as dairy farms and facilities that process milk and milk products to ensure facilities are sanitary and utilizing safe procedures. The Weights and Measures Program protects buyers and sellers by verifying the accuracy of devices which determine quantity in commercial transactions. The program inspects nearly 40,000 devices, including motor fuel dispensers, commercial scales, and the fuel, gas, and mass flow meters every year. The department's plant health program facilitates the export of Nebraska grain commodities by annually issuing nearly 13,000 European corn borer and federal phytosanitary certificates. It performs nursery inspections for the 12,000 licensed nursery stock distributors and registers nearly 14,000 pesticide products used in the state. They inspect facilities that manufacture, distribute, or apply pesticides, and they oversee the implementation of the pesticide applicator certification and training programs. They issue over 5,000 applicator certification licenses each year and review approximately 12,000 fertilizer labels annually. They assist counties in weed control and we regulate the seed and hemp industries. The department's animal health programs include a focus on animal health emergency management to prepare the Nebraska livestock industry for animal health emergency situations. Currently, the department is updating the catastrophic animal mortality management plan with USDA funding to further these efforts. The Animal Disease Traceability Program works closely with USDA and industry partners to allow rapid response to animal diseases while still protecting the privacy of the producer. The recent high-path avian influenza outbreak shows the importance of animal health surveillance and the need for timely, coordinated responses. Other programs within animal health include the Dog and Cat Program, which ensures that over 600 licensed operations stay in compliance with statutory requirements, and the Livestock Feed Program, which inspects and samples feed and reviews feed labels. Nebraska farms and ranches use more than 12 million tons of commercial feed, with total sales in Nebraska close to $3 billion annually. The department is committed to maintaining a balanced budget while continuing to provide the services necessary to grow the agriculture sector in our economy and protect the citizens of this state. With that, thank you, and I'll answer any questions you may have.
Other questions from the committee? I have, see that the equipment purchase you mentioned in this handout, that in the discussion we had, that talking about this comes from cash funds, that we were wondering if you were going to increase the fees to be able to fund that.
At this point, I have not been told that that is necessary. So those are inspections that the department will conduct, not necessarily fees always for other people.
The notes I have say that this has been funded 50% general funds, 50% cash funds, and this request is 100% general fund request.
I have a person from the department here with me, and we can get you a better answer on that if you would like. I'm not confident that I understand it fully enough to give you the proper answer.
Well, we did see that the governor recommended this, but we decided to wait to hear from you before we made a decision
Okay,
regarding this.
would you like an answer right now from Katie, or would you like us to get you that?
Well, once you're done testifying, we'll have the other person come up.
Okay,
And Senator Dover?
On this Core One, how many other states are utilizing Core One? Because it says they can speak to each other.
I can't tell you how many states are using it, but many other states are using Core One. And our on-base is more of a document type system. So it has documents, where Core One is a data type system. And so as we move into the future with animal disease traceability, the federal program is moving to a new stage just this year. They published the rule in the Federal Register. So all livestock of breeding age, 18 months or older, moving out of the state will have to have an EID tag. So it's important that we move to this system.
And when you say livestock, that's specific to, I mean, cattle?
Most specifically cattle,
Okay.
yes.
Senator Doran?
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Thank you for being here. Can you talk a little bit about the bird flu situation, where we're at and what maybe is coming up on the horizon? I know it's not a done deal or whatever. It's not over.
No, it's not a done deal. We just had another case over the weekend where there was a depopulation. However, if you look at the epidemiological curve, last year it was very high, then it dropped off during the summer. It's come back again this winter, but it's not nearly what it was last year. So we're continuing to work. Nebraska's program and our response has been very good. It's recognized nationwide, and we actually have been asked to help other states and work with their programs.
Do you have any idea about approximate number that we've had to euthanize?
I cannot tell you that answer, but Dr. Dudley could. I will get it for you, Senator Dorn.
Thank you.
On the Core One software update, I don't recall what the governor recommended regarding that. Could you refresh my memory?
For the funding for the Core One,
Yes.
let me see if it's here in my notes.
We did not include it in our preliminary.
I don't have a specific number for you there, but we can get you that number as well.
Senator Wishart tells me that it was in his recommendation. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, we'd like to have the next representative discuss the equipment purchase.
Correct.
Good afternoon. I am Katie Harders, K-A-T-I-E-H-A-R-D-E-R-S. I didn't expect to speak today, but I'm happy to answer your questions specific to the equipment purchase. Our laboratory is currently 50% state funded and 50% cash funded. For a large purchase of this type of equipment, we requested for it all to be general funded. And that is because after analysis, our cash funds in support of that purchase, we would have to raise our fees for different inspections for food and feed establishments. So a request was made from the governor for that general funding.
And is somebody working on raising the fees, or who's going to make a decision regarding that?
Well, if this line item is included as part of our general funding, then we wouldn't have to consider raising fees, but our finance department does consider all of the fees that we charge to citizens or industry in the state every 2 years.
Are you saying this is just a one-time need for this equipment and that the fees that you have support other operations otherwise going forward?
Yes, we wouldn't have to change our regular operations or our fees with this general funded support.
I see. That does make a difference. If this is a one-time, this is going to completely take care of the equipment purchase you need.
Absolutely.
Senator Silver?
Does the fee review take place with the budget right now?
Seeing none, do we have any position? Statements, all right. And that will conclude Agency 18, Department of Agriculture, and we have somebody with Department of Agriculture, Potato Board and Poultry Egg. Is there anyone here regarding that division that wishes to testify? Seeing none, that will conclude Department of Agriculture. Next agency is Agency 39, Nebraska Brand Committee. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Senator Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Dwayne Gangwish. It's DUANEGANGWISH. I appear before you today in part on behalf of the over 33,000 registered brand owners in the state of Nebraska, but also on behalf of the beef producers throughout the entire state, which the Nebraska Brand Act protects under the law. I live in Lexington, and I serve as the chairman of the Nebraska Brand Committee and appear before you today in the absence of Mr. John Whittison, who is a pallbearer and a personal friend's funeral this afternoon. The Nebraska Brand Committee was created by the legislature in 1941 to inspect cattle and investigate missing and/or stolen cattle. It is a self-supporting cash agency, and its operating funds come solely from the fees collected for brand recordings, its brand inspections, registered feedlots, and dairies. The Nebraska Brand Committee is nearly fully staffed, and the proposed budget before you today represents no requested change from the committee itself, but is inclusive of the governor's office for others, as well as other state agencies. Operationally, things are running fairly smooth with the Brand Committee, and we are experiencing the continued benefits of the technology updates implemented over the last few years. We're seeing a significant increase in demand on our investigative staff over the last 12 to 18 months, and there have been a few felony convictions that have been successes, and there are several more in process. The investigators have also seen a very increased request from local law enforcement for efforts that they've seen the successes that the investigators have done, and so now they'd like some help at the local county level. I've been brief, and I would be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions? Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you for coming today. So are you completely fully staffed?
I think there are two positions that they're interviewing for that are inspectors.
Okay, so what, you know what the number is? How many inspectors you have?
I do not.
So the fee is at 85 cents.
Fee is currently at 85 cents.
Is there going to be an opportunity to raise that? Are you going to keep it the same? Is revenue about where you thought it would be?
Revenue is slightly less than what we had anticipated. There's been a significant liquidation in the breeding herd in the state of Nebraska, and that will carry forward in years to come as that inventory decreases. We have a robust feeding environment in the state, so that'll offset as cattle come to the Nebraska to be fed versus cow-calf operations in the state. At our next series of meetings, specifically as we get into the summer, we'll really reevaluate. That'll kind of be our first opportunity to reevaluate the fee structure. But at this time, there's been no discussion of changing
So this time is sufficient, the funding is sufficient.
at this moment.
So does the statute allow you to go, what, to $1.10?
It allows us, I think it is $1.05 or $1.10. The statute allows us to fluctuate in there based upon revenue and expense.
Is there a requirement how often you can review that? Is it an annual fee?
To my knowledge, I don't know that answer, Senator. I'm sorry.
Good. Well, thanks for coming.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you
Thank you very
for
much.
coming. Are there other testifiers regarding Nebraska Brand Committee? Proponents, opponents, or neutral? Seeing none, do we have any position statements? Seeing none, that concludes Agency 39. We will switch, open the hearing for Agency 19, Department of Banking. And third up in revenue. So, I don't know, Dan will come get me. Excuse me. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Chairperson Clements, members Appropriations Committee, I'm Kelly Lammers, Kellyllamers, Director of the Nebraska Department of Banking and Finance. The department's responsible for the regulation of financial institutions and financial entities operating in the state, and does so through our Financial Institutions Division and our Securities Bureau. We are a cash-funded agency, operate with two programs, Program 65, the financial institutions, and Program 66. The department supports the governor's recommendation. I'm here to answer any questions the committee may have regarding the department's budget. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Dorn.
Thank you, Senator Clements. There was an article just lately, I think you talked about the situation with the loans that were not, I don't know, whatever you call it, the individual that passed away with those loans. The Department of Banking, what do they, or how do they oversee that? Or is there anything the Department of Banking will become involved with that?
I will answer that in a couple ways. Relative to a pending investigation, I have no comment, Senator. However, globally, the department is in an opportune position to influence and regulate those parties that touch other people's money. Through our Department of Securities, our Securities Bureau, we have investigators that look into activity relative to compliance with Nebraska's Blue Sky Law. Also within the Department of Banking and Finance, within the Financial Institution Division, then we also investigate issues relative to bank fraud. So we have a administrative reach into those avenues, if that is in line with the question that you've asked.
So I understand that. I guess what I take from what you just said is if it depends on where it all goes. We don't know that either or whatever, but if according to our regulations or our statutes, then at that time was when you would, or the Department of Banking would, I call it, become involved or be more involved, or how does that?
At the time that we are aware of an incident which seems irregular, whether that comes to us through a complaint or through someone who shares information or through an examination, we would step in with our ability to investigate that. We have the authority to issue subpoena. We would collect information, conduct interviews. We work very closely with the Nebraska Attorney General's office.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment.
Thank you for the question.
I'll comment that my loan officer had opportunity to entertain a loan request from an individual, and we said no, thank goodness. If I think we're talking about the same person. Regarding that, are you aware of any banks that are going to be severely impaired from losses regarding that incident?
For the last 10 years, the banks in the state of Nebraska state chartered institutions have grown over 90%. Nebraska is in a very enviable position. We have incredibly strong capital, strong reserves, and very good earnings. I have no comment relative to a specific loss on a specific institution, but as an organization, I take great pride in representing the agency that is committed to delivering this type of regulatory oversight, and to the many, many people who work in the banking, credit union, securities, money services businesses. Nebraska is well capitalized with strong reserves within the banking network.
Okay, well, thank you. And your cash fund, I've been contributing to it for 40 years. Glad to hear it's strong. Any more questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Lammers.
Thank you.
And we will now have anyone else would like to testify regarding the Department of Banking, proponent, opponent, or neutral? Seeing none, that concludes Agency 19. We'll now open hearing for Agency 22, Department of Insurance.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Eric Dunning. For the record, that's spelled E-R-I-C-D-U-N-N-I-N-G. I'm the Director of Insurance, and I'm here today in support of the Governor's budget recommendation for the department. Our department is the state agency tasked with regulating insurance in our state. The department has several responsibilities, including regulating solvency of Nebraska's domestic insurers, insurance agent licensing, the market regulation of both insurance producers and insurance companies doing business in Nebraska. The department offers help to policyholders who run into difficulties with insurers, approves insurance rates and forms sold in the state, and is heavily involved in the ever-changing arena of health insurance. We have some other miscellaneous responsibilities, including the collection of more than $120 million in premium taxes every year. The focus in the agency is on protecting policyholders, maintaining a fair regulatory environment, creating a competitive marketplace for insurers and their customers, and growing Nebraska by attracting insurers to domesticate to Nebraska. In this last category, the department and our economic development partners have had some nice successes in the past with redomestications of large insurers, such as Pacific Life, Aflac, Torchmark, AmeriSafe Group, MetLife Tower, and First American Title Insurance Company. Those companies have joined an already robust Nebraska domestic industry of long-time Nebraska insurers such as Mutual of Omaha, Berkshire Hathaway, Assurity, Physicians Mutual, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska, Emeritus, Woodman, Great West Casualty, Farmers Mutual, and a long list of distinguished representatives of the Nebraska insurance industry. Those insurers and other parts of the insurance industry have had a significant impact on our state's economy. The insurance industry is the third largest industry in Nebraska, only behind agriculture and transportation. We bring jobs and economic opportunities to the state. We have the second highest insurance job concentration in the country, with 89% more jobs than would be expected for a state with a population of this size. 14,000 Nebraskans work for domestic insurers in the state, and several thousand more Nebraskans work for non-domestic insurers, and many more people than that work as insurance agents and brokers. The insurance industry sector continues to be an ideal target for growth in Nebraska, and the department continues to seek out new companies. Currently, Nebraska's domestic insurance industry ranks third nationally in assets under management and first in the nation in surplus. I believe we've moved to sixth in terms of the amount of written premium out of Nebraska's domestic insurers. A number of factors have played into why insurers desire to be domiciled in Nebraska. Perhaps the most important is that over the years, the governors, the legislatures, and this committee have done a fantastic job of ensuring that the Department of Insurance has adequate staff and resources to foster the growth and properly regulate the insurance industry in the state. The department has maintained a fiscally conservative approach. The department further works to decrease spending and increase efficiencies by leveraging technology and eliminating redundancies. We believe that the governor's proposed budget is going to allow the department to continue its duties and responsibilities in an effective manner. And I appreciate you bearing with me through a long description of the work that we do at the Department of Insurance. And we're asking that you advance the governor's recommended budget proposals. And of course, I am delighted to answer any questions.
Is there any questions, Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Cummings. Thank you for being here. I guess my question is, a lot of companies are domiciled here in Nebraska.
Yes, sir.
What kind of criteria, and I call it with COVID and work from home, what kind of criteria is there about, or do they have a criteria they have to meet as far as their headquarters location here or workers here, or is there anything that is part of that criteria?
There are no formal criteria for deciding whether or not the department will take on the work of being the core financial services regulator. That tends to be a negotiation with the individual insurer. It's really going to depend on a number of factors. First of all, you can't expect an insurance company with 300 employees to send 700 to Nebraska. So there's that. There's a question of what has been their long-term economic contribution to the state. So if you have an existing company that wants to redomicile a new subsidiary or some other enterprise back to Nebraska, that's going to factor in there as well. So those are some of the things we look
But
at.
if it's a completely, I call it a new company that we haven't had here, is there
Right.
any criteria that
There-
they have to have a headquarters here or anything like that?
No, there is not that's generally referred to as a brick and mortar statute, and we do not have one on the books, and that's allowed us a degree of flexibility in terms of the jobs that we're seeking and hopefully what we can extract out.
Thank you.
Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you, Mr. Dunning, for coming, by the way. Thank you last week for your help. I appreciate that. So in your comments, you said that you collect 120 million in insurance premium. What is that premium? Is it 1%?
It's 1% for most lines of insurance. It's 0.5% for group health.
0.5% for health, group health,
Group health.
okay, and then the rest of it's all 1%.
Yep.
How does that relate to other states?
We're some of the lowest in the country, and that has been an incredible factor in making sure that that's an incredible part of our value proposition. Premium taxes are set on a retaliatory basis, also fees. So that allows us to hopefully improve the tax environment in other states by leading the way with an example of a reasonably set tax and fee structure. So the insurers, I'm sorry, I'll just to build on that. A Nebraska domestic insurer operating in another state is going to pay a premium tax rate that's set at the higher of whatever state they're doing business in or their domestic state. And because we are relatively low, they don't have to pay that increased rate that, say, a state with a higher rate would pay if they were doing business in Nebraska.
So in your comments, you also mentioned 2 or 3, or maybe 4 or 5 new companies that have moved here.
Oh, we have several, yes.
We have numerous. Do you have any idea how many insurance companies are domiciled there?
I believe the number is 110, but that number changes over time.
Wow, thank you.
Senator Dover?
I don't know if I'm going to phrase the question correctly, but each state has kind of a different structure for insurance companies with health insurance in the state of Nebraska. It seems like we're somewhat limited. And a number of years ago, I don't know if it was 5 or 10 years ago, there was a new health insurance company that started up, and there's supposed to be some federal funding to help back them up as they started off initially.
Yes, sir.
Make sure they had enough cash reserve to insure the people and cover the costs going forward. And I believe something happened on a federal level where they had to go out of the market. And it doesn't seem as, at least some things I've read, there isn't as many opportunities for health insurance in the state of Nebraska as perhaps in other states. I wonder if you could just briefly kind of explain for the structure in Nebraska, why that's limited, or if there's anything that can be done to open that up. And I have ignorance as far as this whole thing, so I'm looking to you to just kind of briefly explain that.
That's the beginning of a long conversation that I would be happy to talk your ear off on at any time of your choosing. So I'll come over. I will say that the insurance market is really falls into several buckets, right? So you've got the individual insurance marketplace, which is what most folks think of when they think of health insurance, right? So the health insurance exchanges that were set up under the Affordable Care Act in Nebraska were down at one point to one company on that exchange. We're up to 4 as of 2020 in the 2023 year. But that market is, and those 4 carriers are really going to be a different group of carriers than you might see if we're talking about small group insurance, or if we're going to talk about large group insurance, or if we're going to be talking about self-funded insurance, where typically they're acting as the claims payer for a large employer in paying that money directly. In terms of what happened with Co-Opportunity, which is the company you're referring to, the federal government did set up these enterprises around the country with significant seed capital. Around the country, they did not live up to they did not live up to their proponents' hopes. And to date, out of the mid-20s of these enterprises that were created, there is at most, I believe, 1 of them still standing. So we are not alone. But markets across the country are concentrated or dispersed just on a whole slew of varying factors. Nebraska is, depending on who you talk to, is relatively concentrated. But then if you look at other measures, it's not. So again, we can. I would be happy to talk to you all day about this, but I'm afraid that the rest of the room would throw things at me.
Senator Armendariz?
Hi, thanks for being here. So you said that there's 110 companies?
Give or take, yes.
Okay, in Nebraska. And how many Nebraska jobs does that equate to?
So there are 14,000 Nebraskans who work for those domestic insurers within the state. And then there are several thousand others who work for non-domestics, but not to that degree.
So they still work in the state of Nebraska?
They still work in the state of
Okay.
Nebraska.
Their holding companies just are not domiciled in Nebraska. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, for the non-domestics, correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Seeing no others, thank you, Director Dunning. And we'll entertain other testimony regarding Department of Insurance. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Robert M. Bell. Last name is spelled B-E-L-L. I'm the Executive Director and Registered Lobbyist for the Nebraska Insurance Federation. The Nebraska Insurance Federation is a state trade association of insurance companies in Nebraska. The Federation currently has over 40 member insurance companies. Members of the Federation include companies who write all lines of insurance and who provide over 16,000 jobs to the Nebraska economy and over $14 billion of economic impact to the state on an annual basis. Perhaps most importantly, Nebraska Insurance Federation member companies provide high-value, quality insurance products that protect Nebraskans during difficult times. Insurance is important to the economy of Nebraska, and Nebraska has become known as a very attractive home for insurance companies for a number of reasons, including the relative ease of working with the legislature on needed laws and the reputation of the Department of Insurance. Both of these factors are important because of the nature of how insurance is regulated in the United States. Insurance is a state-based regulatory system that relies on State Department of Insurance accreditation through the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, commonly referred to as NEIC. During the 1980s, a rash of insurance companies' insolvency spurred the NEIC to develop financial regulation standards and accreditation and an accreditation program to certify that the various insurance departments across the nation meet and continue to meet a variety of legal, financial, and organizational standards. Financial examinations done by an accredited insurance department are accepted by other accredited jurisdictions. To bring this discussion back to Nebraska, an accredited Nebraska Department of Insurance means that financial exams completed by the Nebraska Department on Federation member companies will be accepted by all members of the NEIC. Without accreditation, Federation members would be subject to the time and expense of financial examinations by other jurisdictions. Therefore, the Nebraska Insurance Federation has a vested interest in the accreditation of the Nebraska Department. Accreditation by the NEIC is determined by peer review, meaning that other state regulators determine whether or not Nebraska has met the appropriate standards. These standards include not only appropriate laws, but also appropriate staffing. Via the good works of this committee, the legislature as a whole, the administration, and of course the director of the department, the Nebraska remains accredited. So thank you to all of you from the Nebraska Insurance Federation. According to the members of the Federation, one of the major differences between Nebraska and other state insurance departments is the approachability and responsiveness of the staff. When companies are looking for a new home state, Nebraska stands out in this regard. If an insurer has a concern or an issue, companies are able to access department staff, whether an examiner, an actuary, or an attorney, or the director himself. This is not to say that the Nebraska Department does not fulfill its mission to protect the policyholder. Nebraska is a tough but fair when insurance companies need to be held accountable. After reviewing the department's initial request, Governor Pillen's recommended budget, and the preliminary recommendations of the committee, the Insurance Federation sees no issues in the department's budget. So I have no asks today. And again, would like to say thank you to the committee. Looking to the future, as more insurance companies domicile to Nebraska, the domestic industry wants to make sure that the department's resources and staff are adequate to meet growing demands of its time. The domestic industry wants to avoid department staff becoming so overwhelmed that they cannot maintain the responsiveness that makes the department so unique. And with that, thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Any questions? Just one comment. I failed to ask the director about adequate staffing for the growth of number of companies that he has to examine. And I do echo that desire that the staffing is kept up so that we're able to audit companies as we get more of them. But we're also glad to see that the budget is working out well, and I didn't really have a question. Anybody else have a comment? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Bell.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Are there any other testifiers regarding Department of Insurance? Proponents, opponents, or neutral? Seeing none, that concludes Agency 22, Department of Insurance. We will move to Agency 87, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The representative, please come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Paula Gardner, Paulagardner. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Equal Opportunity Commission. The NEOC is an administrative agency statutorily charged with resolving claims of discrimination in the areas of employment, public accommodation, and housing by conducting investigations into allegations of discrimination under 5 distinct laws. We work to eliminate unlawful and discrimination practices in the state via effective case processing and public education activities. The Commission provides an accessible and efficient alternative to litigation in the court system. The NEOC grants all Nebraskans the opportunity to participate in a confidential, neutral investigation and the resolution of complaints of discrimination. The agency runs very leanly, with our primary resource being our investigators. We have 18 investigators across 3 state offices in Lincoln, Omaha, and 1 in Scottsbluff, who investigated complaints from 49 counties this past year. Our investigators processed 717 new charges filed on 13 bases filed under 24 separate issues in employment and public accommodation and 10 separate issues in housing. Those investigators also completed 922 complex civil rights discrimination investigations. The investigator positions generate revenue via compensation under our federal contracts for cases duly filed with the EEOC and HUD. Additionally, our administrative team is incredibly efficient. In addition to managing their team, the 4 supervisors perform additional statutorily or contractually required duties, including managing intake processes, outreach, and conciliation. Last year, intake efforts included more than 4,100 technical assistance calls, as well as managing the 717 new complaints. Outreach activities included direct training and indirect educational opportunities, reaching over 200,000 Nebraskans. Conciliation efforts, which are voluntary, provided over $1 million back to your constituents, saving both complainants and respondents substantial time and money trying to litigate those same issues. These conciliation efforts also benefit nearly 900 others with changes to policies or training. Our business manager handles all HR, IT, policy, and budget processes, and in her spare time volunteers to help test new state systems. We have only 4 staff assistants across our 3 offices to meet the short statutory requirements for processing complaints and subpoenas, to manage and track files from open to storage, and to oversee all the statistics, case processing, and tracking requirements for our state and federal obligations, to prepare monthly commission meetings, and to assist the public via walk-ins and phone inquiries, as well as every other duty assigned. This information is to assist you in understanding a bit more about the important work our agency provides to the state. We appreciate the committee's preliminary recommendations for the NEOC. And as you can see from our budget request, we operate, as I mentioned, leanly, and our greatest cost and our greatest asset is our personnel. To provide some clarification on relationship with our federal agencies, we contract with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and Housing and Urban Development to conduct investigations for allegations of discrimination that occur in Nebraska where the federal law applies. The reimbursements we receive for these investigations cover the salaries of 12 of our 18 investigators, 1 salary of a support staff, and half the salary of a unit director. Because it is work that the investigators do that generate our federal reimbursement funds, maintaining a well-trained investigative staff is imperative for the agency to continue functioning. These past couple of years have proven difficult with the changes that have occurred related to hiring and retaining employees, and that seems to have been exacerbated by the pandemic. The changes we have seen are that our well-trained employees are leaving our agency to work, usually for either the federal government or a municipal government, doing the exact same work for much more pay. In return, we're not getting the same amount of applicants to replace those same employees. We have discovered over many years that we must preserve a certain amount of these federal funds in our accounts to manage the timing differences between the state fiscal year and the federal fiscal year relative to payouts under our federal contracts. This amount is also proving necessary as the changes in our staffing impact the funds we receive. For example, our EOC contract for this year is 746 cases, paid at $830 per case. That amount is attainable when we have a full staff. However, that contract is more difficult or perhaps impossible to attain when we have a smaller number of fully trained investigators. I share this with you to assure you that the funding recommendation from the committee is not just sincerely appreciated, but necessary for the NEOC to continue to serve Nebraskans. I would also like to note that while we're supportive of the governor's recommendation, it does not include funding for the retirement payout of a very long-term employee. And so we would ask that you consider that payout. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions? Senator Dover?
I'm new to this committee. What's your relationship with the NEOC?
I'm the executive director.
Okay, so this is the NEOC?
Yeah, this is the NEOC.
Okay, I did, my wife served for 7 years on the NEOC. I just didn't know, I looked at this, I didn't see the NEOC. That's basically the HUD.
Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
Okay. And the NEOC is?
We're the Nebraska Equal Opportunity Commission, and then there's the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and Housing and Urban Development that we have contracts with.
Okay. And so statute allows it, HUD allows it in the state of Nebraska, in any state, you can have an equivalency?
As long as the laws are substantially equivalent, the federal government agencies will enter into contract with you to conduct the investigations in your respective state.
Okay, right, thank you.
One comment, checking with the fiscal agent, we did approve the retirement payout.
You did, but it was not in the governor's budget.
Oh,
Oh, should have said that.
Oh.
I did at the very end. I said, I appreciate you, but the governor didn't approve that
Oh, I
particular
see. I
payout.
thought you
Yes.
said we did.
No, you did. I
Yeah, well,
completely appreciate your budget
we
recommendations.
overrode the governor in that regard.
I was sort of hoping that if it wasn't paid out, I'd have to keep her working, but I was told that's not possible.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Are there any other testifiers regarding Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, proponent, opponent, neutrals? Seeing none, that concludes Agency 67. We'll open the hearing for Agency 82, Commission on Deaf and Hard of Hearing.
I'll show you all the.
Welcome.
Hi. Good afternoon, Chairperson Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Kelsey, K-E-L-S-E-Y, Cruz, C-R-U-Z, and I'm the Interim Executive Director and Marketing and Communications Specialist for the Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Our agency's mission is to advocate to create opportunities by raising awareness through collaboration. Our vision is simply access for all. Our team works throughout the state of Nebraska to educate, inform, empower, and provide training to clients, families, and organizations who work with people who are deaf and hard of hearing. I'm here today to ask the Appropriations Committee for additional funding to support a full-time American Sign Language, ASL, staff interpreter. Access to effective communication for our employees is vital to carry out our work. This includes having a full-time, qualified sign language interpreter on our team. I emphasize qualified, meaning the interpreter can interpret effectively, accurately, and impartially. Qualified also includes their receptive skills, which means understanding what the person with a disability is saying, and expressive skills, having the skill needed to convey information using any necessary specialized vocabulary. Currently in our agency, 45% of our employees rely on a qualified licensed interpreter to effectively communicate. The ADA under Title I requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations so that employees with disabilities can enjoy the benefits and privileges of employment equal to those enjoyed by employees without disabilities. An ASL staff interpreter is a vital and reasonable accommodation to enable our employees to perform essential functions of their jobs and allow them equal access. So thank you for the opportunity, and hopefully I can answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Could you clarify that full-time interpreter would be just for your agency
Correct.
to assist your employees?
Correct.
And how many employees are there?
Currently, we have 12 on staff and 4 employees are deaf.
All right, well, we'll consider that request. Any other, don't see any other questions, so thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there any other testifiers regarding the Commission on Deaf and Hard of Hearing? Proponents, opponents, or neutral? Seeing none, that concludes Agency 82. We'll now open the hearing for Agency 81, Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Carlos Servan, C-A-R-L-O-S, space S-E-R-V-A-N. My address is 3800 C Street, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68510. I am the Executive Director of the Nebraska Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, NCBVI. The Commission for the Blind is Agency 81, Program 357. We are the vocational rehabilitation agency for the blind in Nebraska. We provide services through the same federal laws as the Nebraska Department of Education Vocational Rehabilitation, otherwise known as VR agency. Most of NCBVI funds come from the U.S. Department of Education, Rehabilitation Services Administration. Federal dollars provide funding matched to minimum state dollars, 78.7 federal to 21.3 state for voc rehab. NCBVI provides comprehensive services so people who are blind and visually impaired can get off public support and into employment, paying taxes, living independently, and contributing to their communities. We are requesting an increase of state VR funds of $610,331 due to the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act WIOA mandate of expending at least 15% of our basic support funds for pre-employment transition on direct services. And also in 2021, with the passage of LB 527 in Nebraska, the age group for transition was expanded from 16 to 14 years old. The kind of pre-ed services we provide, the WIOA mandates 3 main areas on several subsections. 5 require pre-ed services, 9 authorized pre-ed services, and 4 pre-ed transition coordination. In my official written testimony, I listed the 18 different subsections. I will, however, mention some of the programs and services we provide under pre-eds. As you may know, blindness is a low-incident disability, and more we are seeing clients with multiple disabilities. Most of the world is designed for sighted people. Therefore, they need to invest on innovative ways to come up with opportunities and tools to help them to compete in society. One of our programs is the Work and Gain Experience in the Summer, WAGES. It's a 6-week intensive work-based learning program held annually at UNL for blind and visually impaired youth between the ages of 16 and 21 years old. They come from all over the state, as this opportunity is not available to them in their towns. The youth live at the university campus, which allows them to gain experience in living in a college dorm, meet other blind youth from the state of Nebraska, and learn from successful blind counselors. The primary purpose of this program is to provide meaningful work experiences to blind and visually impaired youth. The youth work between 30 to 40 hours per week on a variety of locations, such as restaurants, childcare centers, libraries, hotels, museums, and government agencies. During the evenings and weekends, students received training on blindness skills, such as adaptive equipment, technology, cooking, and taking public transportation to and from work. Teaching and job coaching is provided throughout the program. Students also participate on a wide variety of challenging activities, which help them to build their self-esteem and confidence. Another program is Winner Fest. Blind teenagers come from across the state to participate on a semi-annual 3-day retreat. Activities are focused on personal advocacy, social and independent living, achievement goals, communication skills, alternative techniques for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and mentoring, to mention a few. The other program is robotics, a whole week program that showcases the mathematical and computer science abilities of blind students. Many transferable skills are learned, as well as advocacy and confidence skills that directly relate to employability. All of this to accessible technology and engineers coming from other states who know about this equipment and have experience teaching blind students. College workshop. Students are brought together for a 3-day program where they learn about advocacy skills, such as requesting appropriate accommodation, literacy, informational interviews, college tours, meeting with university disability offices, staff, and techniques for online classes. They also learn about the importance of managing their readers, their schedules, and get part-time jobs, as well as getting access to science classes and having social life in college. Cyber.org training, bringing in blind scientists to provide skills to blind and visually impaired students who usually don't get a chance to participate on science stuff in school, such as animal dissection. Talking Lab Quest. The Commission for the Blind purchased Talking Lab Quest equipment, which offer hands-on science, including labs for the blind. This is empowering individuals to pursue careers on STEM. Besides the programs, our field counselors meet vision teachers across the state, attend IEPs or individualized educational plans, attend meetings and programs with Nebraska Center for the Education of Children who are blind and visually impaired in Nebraska City, and other meetings with local educational agencies. What services are being limited because of the mandate of WIOA and LB 527? With 15% of our basic support budget restricted to pre-aids, we have to limit our number of visits, our counselors, to other VR consumers, and group services have to be limited also. The number of VR counselors has not increased since the implementation of WIOA and the passage of LB 527. Therefore, staff are required to spend more time with transition students and less time with adults. Counselors are having less visits to clients in their homes to provide training, especially in the rural areas. Less group teaching, less contact with employers or businesses, less contact with clients working on placements, and less time putting together employment and placement conferences. As a consequence, we are also getting less referrals to our training center. We are unable to provide the adequate specialized services to clients. Our 15% VR grant will be around $518,651 for federal fiscal year 2024, plus an additional $91,000 as a result of the passage of LB 527 for ages 14 and 15. NCBBI was not included like the general VR agency was included for the appropriations bill for LB 527. In other words, VR agency got an increase and we didn't. The total request is for $610,231. NCBBI served 141 transition students in 2021, 154 in 2022, and we are expecting to serve around 167 this year. This population will continue to grow over the coming years as medical and technology advances save the life of more and more premature infants who are likely to have disabilities, including blindness. NCBBI expects even more referrals of students with multiple disabilities in addition to the blindness. Increased funding for VR services will allow Increased funding for VR services will allow NCBBI to leverage federal funds to have adequate staffing for all of our programs without limiting quality services to the adults. To be truly effective and inclusive, we need to provide the proper training and tools and the support to help the blind thrive. That's my testimony, and I will be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Senator Dorn.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Thank you for being here, Director. I guess I'm trying to understand a little bit. You talk about in here that many of your programs, there's a federal part of the funding that goes with that. And yet this, because of 527 and this $610,000 in ask, I'm trying to understand if there's part of a federal program that goes with that, or is that just a general fund ask, or exactly where that fits? Is there federal funds that will go with that?
No, the federal government didn't increase anything. They just told us from the basic support funds that we have, we need to assign the 15% to transition services. And my explanation is trying to clarify that because we are now spending time and money on that population, we are not having enough for the adults.
So this is above and beyond then I call it the programs prior to 2021 then, qualified under the federal match, or many of your programs do. Or maybe I'm asking wrong, I don't know. Yeah.
It gets complex, yeah. We didn't ask funds before because when the WIOA mandates came out, we were waiting for, well, number one, the regulations. Then we tried to focus on the changes we were having here, then the pandemic. But now it's time for us to ask because eventually we are not going to have those funds and we kind of have, we do have some what we call a program income. When we place clients on jobs and they get off Social Security, we get reimbursed for a good portion of the training we put on them. But that kind of money is not secure. It's just, sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't. And that's why we are asking this ongoing support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Vargas.
Thank you, Director, for being here. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about, just in general, how the entire program works. I know you wrote in here, the federal dollars provide funding if matched with minimal state dollars. If we are allocating more general funds to the agency, to the program, are we going to get more federal funds matched to this?
At this point, no, because we are we are getting enough from the state in order to get the federal match. Yeah.
Do the feds anticipate better funding the new act that they passed?
No, they already say they are not. They expect the states to do that.
So it's on us. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That was what I was trying to get at.
Yeah. Any other questions? I appreciate you coming. Your testimony is amazing, and what you do is amazing. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Just one last comment. If you cannot, I guess, provide all the support we're asking, anything will help.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. Is there anyone else to testify for the blind and visually impaired? Please come forward. Could you come forward? If you need some help, you can help her. Would you like to put a chair? Would you like to put a chair beside her?
No, I'm okay.
Table over here?
Yeah, that'll be fine. You can sit right there.
Seat there. Okay, and there's a microphone here. Yes.
Oh, I thought I shut up.
Thank you for coming. You can begin whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Thank you.
Voiceover on. Voiceover on. Open settings. Sorry.
It's okay. Take your time.
Bluetooth. App switcher. Close setting. Closing set.
Open
App switcher.
Open settings. Sorry, I'm disconnected from my
Settings.
desk.
Legal and regulatory. Bluetooth. On. Notification. Sound. Focus. Screen time. Selected. Control center. Display and accessibility. Accessibility. Heading. Vision. Voiceover. Voiceover. Accessibility. Tap once to select an item. Double tap to active. Learn more. Speaking rate. Speed. Braille. Output. Voice. Searching. Dip. Searching. Selected. Braille set. Selected. Braille Sense U 2223.
Just a minute here. Hopefully we connect. Did it?
General. Button.
Uh-oh, why did it not? Should.
Equations use
There we go.
code. On.
Open notes.
Note. Legislature, February 18th.
Okay, I'm gonna turn off the speech here.
Speech off.
So I can just read these in this.
Let me make sure I'm on the right page. before I
Okay.
start.
Start whenever you're ready.
Come on. What is this? What is this? Oh, okay. Please. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Heba Jandali, HebaJandali. I'm 20 years old and I'm from Syria. And now I live in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I'm now a United States citizen. A few things I learned from the commission. Money skills. Connie and I worked on money skills, and she also taught me how to fold the dollars in different ways. That way I know what I have. And that also helps me keep track of the money I have. Kin travel skills. Kin travel skills helps me get around and navigate independently. Connie also worked on these skills. Let's see what else. Wages. Wages is a summer program through the commission where I get stay at our campus for 6 weeks and I get a job experience. My job for wages was I worked at the Lincoln Children's Museum. I do cleaning tables and chairs, sanitizing all the toys, washing all the costumes, drying them, and putting them away. And I had a job coach to help me navigate around there. And I also worked at the state capitol where I work at the information desk and directing people, giving information, answering questions. And I had a job coach to help with that. What else did I do? Helps me get a job. Jeff and Connie helps me get hired at the museum, and I'm an official employee there. I do the same thing like what I used to do for wages, and I'm happy I have a job now. And also, Jeff job coached a couple of times, so I got used to it, and it was fun. Improved confidence. I independently applied for a job to work at Select Dining Hall, and my job there is to run food, and I independently asked Jeff to job coach, and it was really good. I'm so happy now I have 2 jobs. Like, it was good. The Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired Services are important to blind people because they encourage them to do a lot of things on their own. They help them travel independently. They work with them on cooking skills, and they also help blind people get together, make friends, and do fun activities. Thank you so much for your time. Are there any questions?
Thank you for your testimony. That is amazing. You did a nice job. Any questions? I appreciate you coming today. Thank you for your job, for being finding 2 jobs. That's great.
Yep.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Next testifier. Hi, good afternoon.
Hello. I'm Tara Knuth, Taraknuth. I'm the Executive Director of the Lincoln Children's Museum. So at the Lincoln Children's Museum, we invite children to create, learn, and discover all through the power of play. Holding a space for all people where they feel welcomed and valued is at our core. Over the past 4 years, we've got a partnership with the Nebraska Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And through that time, we've seen a positive impact to that partnership, not only with the individuals that the commission hires, but also with our employees, as well as the museum guests. The benefits that children have seeing people of all abilities performing everyday tasks has lasting effects. Over the past 4 years, we've been a work location host to the employees of the commission wages program. Through this work-based program, the employees work closely with our staff in a variety of museum departments. One of their favorite, of course, is the camps and hands-on experiences. Through that, they also work with our facilities management team, assisting with exhibit cleaning and disinfecting, ensuring a safe environment for all of our guests. Heba, who you just heard from, joined our team in the summer of 2021 through the wages department program. She was when she first began, she had a job coach with her. But it didn't take her long to be able to navigate our building on her own, even being 24,000 square feet and 3 stories. After that, she learned all the different spaces and her roles and tasks, and we were able to hire her on as an employee of the museum. Heba has integrated well into our staffing culture and embodies the pillars of respect, collaboration, accountability, and energy as part of our workforce environment. She quickly learned how to maintain cleanliness and safety in our museum. In addition to her positive attitude and her eagerness to learn, Heba has filled us an important role as an employer in Lincoln to have that position filled. We continue to see upward attendance and growth at the Lincoln Children's Museum, and we prioritize health and cleanliness. Heba and others with her and the operations team helps fulfill that philosophy. We are very grateful for her hard work and dedication. We feel confident knowing we can leave responsibilities in her capable hands and she'll get the job done. Through the time since Heba joined us, even now that she is fully employed at the museum, the Nebraska Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired has been a constant support and resource for us. The partnership has been very valuable as it provides us a safe environment and a diverse workforce.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. We'll invite the next testifier up.
Miranda Solsa, MirandaSolsaa. So I've been working with the commission since, 6th grade in middle school. And they have helped me with IEP support, meaning that they would come out to my school and support me with my IEP, and even just helping with how I can be included in classes. I was able to participate in group trainings with the commission, and I was able to learn how to work as a group with other people my age and younger, and some were older. I got an internship with the Commission for the Blind in March through May of 2021, working in the technology classroom. Through the commission, I was able to get a job working at a daycare in Waverly, Nebraska, working with the kids who are 4 and 5 years old. And I was able to go to wages with the Commission for the Blind, where I had a job coach, and I was able to work for JB&K Services out of Colorado. But I worked from the commission, and I plan to attend the Nebraska Commission for the Blind Training Center starting in March to work on more independent living and employment skills.
Thank you so much for coming today. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Additional individuals who want to testify for the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired? Seeing none, do we have any? We don't have any letters for the record, so that will close the hearing for Agency 81, and we will open the hearing for Agency 23, the Department of Labor. Good afternoon, Director Alvin.
Good afternoon. Members of the Appropriations Committee, Vice Chair Wishart, for the record, my name is John Albin, John Albin, and I am the Commissioner of Labor. I come here today in support of the Governor's budget recommendations for the Department of Labor. The Nebraska Department of Labor would like to thank the Governor for recognizing the critical need Nebraska's unemployment insurance program serves. As most of you are aware, the Nebraska Department of Labor's unemployment insurance program is a federal-state partnership. Nebraska's administration of the program is currently 100% federally funded. Unfortunately, the United States Department of Labor has continuously underfunded this critical program, failing to provide states with adequate administrative funding for program success. Nebraska is one of the just a few states that does not utilize state funding to supplement its federal administrative budget. Federal funding of the unemployment program is determined through a needs-based formula established by USDOL known as Resource Justification Model. Based on projected workload, states are awarded a base grant amount. If actual workload exceeds projections, states are awarded above base funding. This model has not been adjusted for inflation or cost of living increases since its inception. States are expected to perform the same work at the exact same cost as they did 30 years ago. This is unrealistic. Salary, benefits, and technology costs have all increased. While Nebraska has prudently handled the increased costs through process efficiency, technology upgrades, and increased staff productivity, the outdated funding formula is not an accurate measure of the cost of program administration. This problem is compounded because USDOL is no longer honoring its own formula, failing to provide states with even the full base amount. States cannot successfully carry out unemployment insurance programs under the depleted federal funding. In 2015, NDOL received $14.4 million in federal funds for administration. In 2022, despite the significantly increased workload in the wake of the pandemic, funding was less than 7 years earlier, with NDOL receiving only $14.18 million. NDOL is in the fortunate place to have additional federal funds available that, if appropriated by the legislature, can be used for the administration of its unemployment insurance program. NDOL has unspent READ Act distributions that, pursuant to sections 903D and 903F of the Federal Social Security Act, can be used for the administration of unemployment. NDOL is seeking the authority to utilize those federal funds as outlined in LB 814 due to the continued underfunding USDOL has done to the unemployment insurance program. Additionally, NDOL's budget includes $10 million in general funds for state aid for workforce development. This funding is in response to NDOL's successful ARPA programs related to retention and workforce development. Under LB 1014, NDOL was awarded $10 million in funding to be awarded through the Nebraska Worker Training Board. The department created 3 ARPA grant programs. The department's first 2 programs were focused on the retention of workers in the healthcare, teaching, and daycare industries. Under those 2 programs, eligible employers could apply for retention bonuses of up to $2,500 for all eligible workers. The third program gave employers flexibility to request funds for programs as they saw fit. The programs were well received by the business community. The department received over 500 employer applications for over $60 million. The applications covered over 27,000 employees. The department allotted $4 million for both the nursing recruitment and retention grant and the teacher and child care recruitment and retention grants. And $2 million was allotted for the more flexible workforce development program. All the grants are fully awarded. The department only had sufficient funds to award 102 of over 500 employers that applied for the grant programs, leaving approximately $50 million in unmet demand. The 10 million in general funds provided in LB 814 will allow NDOL to continue a similar program model to recruit, train, retrain students and workers in high-need fields. This concludes my testimony, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Director. Any questions? Senator Urban.
Thank you, Senator Wishart. Thank you today for being here, Director Alvin. I have a question, I guess, on the distribution of unemployment payments, and the audit of your agency has been somewhat in question with the DAS. Have you gotten that taken care of, that the audit is going to be more accurate so that we get an unqualified opinion from the?
Yes, we've taken a number of measures to address those issues. One was we turned over most of the staff at the top of our finance division and in the treasury unit, which was responsible for those allocations. So we brought in some new leadership that's working almost daily with DAS, state accounting, to get those accounts brought into true. On the latest unmodified opinion, a lot of it was because the previous incumbents in that office of CFO, or controllers we call it then, had not ensured that they had the proper tracking so that the funds tracked and could be reconciled into E1. Because of the way the federal funds come down, we can't do everything in E1. We have to enter our numbers into E1. They just did not do an adequate job. I don't think it's finalized yet, but in this week, we had a memorandum of understanding with Deloitte, which has been retained by DAS to do accounting measures and checks for the state of Nebraska. And we're going to spend about $250,000, give or take, to reconcile accounts, because in this latest audit, one of the big problems that we found as we got into it was that there had not been an adequate reconciliation of the data that was brought forward from the old system into the new system. And if you start with bad data, you're never going to get good data in the end. And so our goal, if I remember the end date right, is by the end of April, Deloitte will have those reconciliations done for us so that we can get those accounts brought forward. Because as you know from the unemployment system, those experience accounts of employers are carried forward from the day they open to the day they close. And so if you don't correct those errors, it's just going to perpetuate itself. So we work with them on that. We work with our vendor very hard to make sure that those accounts get tracked into the proper funnels. I mean, the nice thing about it is, if you look at it, there were funds lost, it wasn't funds misapplied, there wasn't funds that were disallowed, but they weren't booked properly. And so my CFO's number one job these days, and she's doing an admirable job of it, is to get those accounts brought into true, because I do not want there to be another modified opinion. In fact, as you're familiar with both the Ricketts administration and this administration, we all have SMART goals. And one of the A in there is attainable. And one of my SMART goals is that we have the books brought into true so that there is no modified opinion this year.
That would be good. That would be really good. I've always been kind of amused by the fact that they say there were no funds unaccounted for, but you can't account for what the funds were. So how do you know that there wasn't some discrepancy somewhere? I always had a difficult time saying, they say, well, we know that there wasn't any funds misplaced or taken by anybody, but we can't prove where they went. So how do you know that?
Well, actually, it's not so much a case that they couldn't prove where they went. It's just that they didn't get booked in the right accounts. I mean, the corrective entries that were made last year, that was the large number, 1.2 billion in corrective entries, in the exit conference with the APA, it was like, okay, did we get everything corrected and into the right accounts? And our understanding from their conversation was yes, and that was our response on the final audit. So we did trace that money back. It's just, it took a lot of work time to get those back, and it's the same way now with getting these accounts brought in on the tax system into the right accounts. It's a lot of work. It's there. It's nothing disappeared, but there's a lot of work to get it done.
I'm looking forward to a clean audit.
You and me both.
Thank you.
Additional questions, Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Wishart. Thank you for coming again, Director. in the past, or I think it was maybe a year, I don't remember, 2 years ago, when you were here, we talked a little bit about, and one of it was the article about California and the federal funding that came down during COVID, and that there was some fraud involved in all of that. And at that time, you thought there might be here, or there was possibly, have you cleared that up, or is there some concern there was, like, basically, when I say fraud, people applying for it that shouldn't have been able to apply?
Well, I think fraud's been in the unemployment system since day one. I mean, it's like operating a retail shop. Somebody's going to try and shoplift from you. So we have our equivalent of that in our program. But the pandemic brought on levels that none of us had seen before. And I think it changed fundamentally the type of fraud that we confronted. In the past, most of the fraud that we confronted was people who went back to work and didn't bother to tell us, or took a side job while they were claiming, didn't bother to tell us, and got the extra money. There really wasn't any history of the organized campaigns that there were during the pandemic to steal money from us. I think the problem was exacerbated, and there was the various financial entities and retailers that got hacked and their data stolen. I mean, you could go out and buy almost anyone's social security number if they'd ever done business with Equifax or Target or any of those, because the social security numbers, the physical addresses were all in there. So there was fraud in Nebraska. There's no doubt about it. I've got specific numbers here somewhere if I could put it up. I guess first of all, just start with the national rates. The national rate right now is calculated by USDOL for BAM, and that's the benefit accuracy measurement, which measures regular unemployment, not the pandemics. But under their methodology, they do scientifically selected samples. They are saying the national rate is 6.769% for the fiscal year that ended on September 30th. Their calculation for Nebraska for that same time period was 3.122%. which is 2% higher than I would ever like to see it, because I think 1% is where we were back pre-pandemic days. So we did work confronted with fraud. I've got specific numbers I thought in here somewhere. There was, just in terms of the pandemic claims themselves, I do remember that number off the top of my head. There was about 60 million in overpayments, and we have recovered 23 million out of that. Probably a third of that was fraud. So yeah, we got hit by fraud more than any time before. We've taken a lot of measures since then. And last fall, we tapped into some federal funds that were made available to us to hire LexisNexis to implement their what they call threat matrix, which is software used to verify identities and account information, because everybody in every state primarily does their claims over the internet. So there's a verification package that they bought, and then we got some extra money elsewhere on another federal grant, and so we've added a second LexisNexis product called Amplify. Both we think are substantial upgrades in terms of being able to verify identities, fraudulent email addresses, and then of course we were one of the founding states, I guess, with the National Integrity Data Hub, which is run by NASWA, a federal association under contract with the United States Department of Labor, where we verify things for fraudulent email addresses, social security numbers used in multiple states. Cell numbers is another big one on it. If the same phone number comes up on multiple claims. In addition, we, as required by US DOL or by law, we do the federal Social Security prisoner cross matches. We also do a state one that we're not required to do, but we actually like a lot with the CGIS program. We cross match prisoner lists to see if someone claiming is actually receiving unemployment or is incarcerated, which under Nebraska law they're not considered available. So we use a variety of measures. It will evolve continually, because one of the things that the crooks discovered was that there was a lot of money out there in the unemployment world, and if you were fraudulent and good at it, you could tap into it. So we've been trying mightily to reduce that down to a level. I think the fact that we're half the national average says we've done a decent job, but I'd like to see it back down around 1%, which is where we were pre-pandemic.
Thanks, Director. Any additional questions?
No, thank you for the information. Thank you.
Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional testifiers for the Department of Labor? Seeing none, we have no letters for the record, so we'll close the hearing for Agency 23 and we will open the hearing for LB 614, Senator McDonnell.
Thank you, Senator Wishart, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Mike McDonnell, MIKEMCDONNELL. I represent Legislative District 5, South Omaha. LB 614, which provides funding for a program that will provide a dollar-for-dollar private sector match to fund a pilot program for test emergency technologies and sustainable irrigation. Nebraska is blessed with a wealth of water resources, and we need to make sure that we are using these resources as well as possible. While only 4% of Nebraska's water is used directly for human consumption, the remaining 96% goes towards supporting our robust economy. Our groundwater supplies 81% of our irrigation needs. Surface water provides 13% of the remaining. 2% are allocated for livestock and industrial purposes. Boasting an impressive 9 million acres of irrigated farmland, Nebraska is the country's leader in this area by a landslide. Nebraska already has at least $8.4 billion in water projects on the books, including the Perkins Canal project at $575 million, investments from the city of Lincoln for a second source of water estimated at $1 billion, estimated project costs in the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, as well as $4.4 billion in active watershed plans throughout the state. Nebraska's water is Nebraska's future, and its growing price tag is certainly worth noting. Through the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, the United States is now investing over $20 billion to support climate-smart agriculture practices and develop new technology. LB 614, a pilot program, creates a unique opportunity for Nebraska to continue to identify, pioneer, and export new irrigation technologies around the world. Due to our advanced agricultural practices, we are able to produce more food and less water. This is particularly evident in the center pivot system developed here in Nebraska, technology that has since been exported around the world. Through the pilot program, we can assist existing irrigation systems by testing out promising emerging technologies like moisture sensors, advanced metering systems, and remote control valves that can help us use water more efficiently and effectively. By doing so, we will be able to reduce water usage while also providing long-term environmental benefits such as reducing soil erosion and nutrient loading. This will further cement Nebraska's place as a leader in global agricultural productivity. Additionally, Sarah Cohn is here to testify. She connected us with Dr. Clyde Lipchin, who is globally renowned expert in water resource management and has become an authoritative voice on water scarcity and water governance. His expertise has been integral in helping Israel transition from a water poor nation that now boasts a thriving agricultural sector which supports a growing population. Through discussions with the Doherty Water Food Institute, Valmont, Sarah, and Dr. Lipchin, we thought a good path forward would be to develop a pilot program to test these new technologies and encourage their production and adoption here in Nebraska. The proposed pilot program is a great way to ensure that Nebraska leads on this global challenge and positions us in as an innovator in developing efficient, sustainable water use technologies. Here's how this came about. Sarah's here to testify, and she came back from Israel, had a chance to actually sit through some of Dr. Clive's presentations, get to know him a little bit, and actually physically see this in action and how it's helping Israel and helping other places around the world. So we started having the discussion, and through telephone conversations, through emails. Also, Dr. Clive Lipchin will be speaking to the World Water Day on March 22nd at the United Nations as their guest speaker. He wanted to try to come here. If we could have timed it better, he would have. But that's how serious he is about helping us. Through those discussions with the Doherty Foundation, with the Belmont and others, university of course, and the college system, we feel that at this point, if we could look at having a private-public partnership at this amount of dollars, where we could move forward and not only test the irrigation and some of the new technologies that are going on in Israel, but also the idea of developing them. And that's what Sarah's here to give you a clear vision of, and some of the things she's experienced firsthand when she was in Israel.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions? Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Senator Wishart. Senator McDonnell, have you seen the fiscal note?
I have.
Can you explain on that page?
Which one?
It would be the second one.
Nebraska Department of Agriculture?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can.
It says 1.5 million of general funds, and at the bottom it says total funds 3 million.
It's got to be a dollar for dollar match, and we're last dollar in. If we can't come up with the match of 1.5 million from the private sector, then this will not go forward.
Okay, so the other 1.5 comes from the private sector.
Yes.
Could that be the university?
No.
Some like Belmont?
It could be Belmont, but I'm not committing Belmont, but they've been very helpful. It could be another foundation that would step forward.
Okay. So going forward, pilot project, 1 year?
Well, I believe we should be able to complete it in 1 year.
And you're not anticipating this being an ongoing program going forward?
If we test it and start developing it, I believe it will be out of our hands quickly because of someone, as you mentioned, Belmont, will move forward with this.
Isn't it true that maybe Israel already has these components already working there and we can just copy what they do?
Well, I'm never too proud to steal a good idea, but I think as Nebraskans, we can do it better than they can. Now that's, with their help, of course, with our work ethic, with our technology, I think we can always take something to improve on it.
People are very smart in Israel.
They are, and I give them credit. Now let's steal a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Dover.
In your statement, third paragraph, it says that Nebraska already has at least 8.4 billion in water projects on the books. And then you referred to Perkin, obviously new to the group here. So is that to be spent, taking the biennial, or what is that 8.4 billion actually represent?
Yeah, I can get you a total breakdown from throughout the state, exactly what projects, like for example, Lincoln's in right now for a potential $1 billion for their second water source. This is all projects.
This is somewhat proposed, somewhat committed for the future.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I need. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none.
I will be here to close.
I hope so. Next testifier in support. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you all doing?
Good.
Good. My name's Sarah Cohen, Sarakohen, and I live in Omaha. I'm really excited to be here. And I'm here because I care deeply about the future of Nebraska. My husband and I, we have 4 kids, and we're raising them here, and I certainly hope they will stick around when they grow up, too. And I'm really excited about this bill for a couple of reasons. The first is that it will help to protect the future of agriculture in this state, which is, of course, a huge industry and important for our economy. But also it'll help encourage businesses to develop innovative new technology right here in Nebraska, and so hopefully too, create some good new jobs and keep our young people here. As Senator McDonnell mentioned, and by the way, thank you for the introduction, Israel has really seen a lot of success in this area, and I was able to go visit there this past summer. And one of the places I went to was the Arava Institute, and it's located at Kibbutz Keturah in the Negev Desert. Excuse me. So you're driving there, and it's just, I mean, just dry, hardly any vegetation as far as you can see. And then all of a sudden, you see this huge date palm grove, which is really remarkable, actually. Date palms are really water intensive generally, but here they are in the middle of the desert. And the reason they were able to do that is because of some of the research that they've been doing and the innovations they had developed, places like the Arava Institute. Oh, thank you so much. And other places. And so the Arava Institute is doing all this really interesting research in sustainable irrigation and a number of other areas too. And then people are taking that and applying it across the country. So if you look around, everything from tomatoes and cucumbers that you buy at the market to they've got this irrigation in the public parks where they're using recycled water and no fresh water at all. But what it's done in addition to helping their agricultural industry thrive is that they also have this rapidly growing, successful high-tech sector. And this is part of that. And so now bringing things back to Nebraska, because this is home, of course we have a lot more water resources naturally than Israel does. And we're fortunate in that regard. But also scientists predicting a hotter, drier future for the state and depleted aquifers, it's really important to be proactive and take this on head on. And the bill presents an opportunity too to help our businesses innovate and develop new technology right here in Nebraska. They'll help address these challenges. And we do have businesses that are working in this area already. As Senator McDonnell mentioned, Valmont's one of them. I drive past their headquarters in Omaha just about every day. And by helping them and others do more of this research, we'd be encouraging economic growth and, of course, helping ensure that we aren't caught flat-footed by the water challenges of tomorrow. So for all of these reasons, I'm asking you all to vote in favor of this bill.
Thank you so much for being here today. Any questions, Senator?
Thank you, Senator Wishart. So if you could help me understand what is Israel doing different than what we're doing here?
Well, in terms of what they're doing, I know they, sorry, let me back up and answer that question better. So I think that one of the experts like Dr. Lipchin, who Senator McDonnell mentioned, he would be better qualified to answer that in detail. I'm a lawyer by training and I'm a school administrator, but I've had the opportunity to see some of the stuff they're doing. So I thought drip irrigation was really cool. I mentioned, going to a public park, and what you see is they have these little hoses that are stretched out along, and they just have drips of water right at the root of the plants, only as much as they need. And they do that also on sort of a larger scale in agricultural projects.
Okay, are they doing center pivot irrigation there?
I do not know the answer to that question. Do you know the answer to that?
I don't, I'll find out.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Additional proponents for LB 614? Seeing none, anyone in opposition? Seeing none, anyone in the neutral? Seeing none, Senator McDonnell, you're welcome to close.
So the idea of having the private public partnership.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I thought before he gets going, I thought I'd ask a question. I just want John to ask it.
Oh, okay, but
Ask
first
it.
we're gonna let him.
Oh, I got it.
close
I
and
got
then-
it. I thought you ask a question first, but then wrap it up. But okay, that's the process. Thank you. I'm new, as you well know.
I gotta hear your question. Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Okay, Senator.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Senator.
Sorry.
Yes.
I was wondering how the application process worked for the money.
Well, that would be through the Department of Agriculture. Now, the reason, which is part of my closing anyway, is the idea of having that private-public partnership and us that last dollar in. Let's say, using Belmont, because we've had discussions, says, well, we have all this technology, or there is something that really interests us. At that point, which we know that this interests them, and based on some of this, the research and the work of Dr. Clive Lipchin, but the idea of us saying that to the private sector, that we think we know best as government, and sometimes government needs to plow away, sometimes government needs to get out of the way. The idea would be that if we can have that dollar for dollar match to do the testing and then the development, I think we can do this in a way where we're taking their good ideas and adapting them to the state of Nebraska, and that would be the goal. So the programming would be done through the Department of Agriculture. When I say that, with the idea of the requests.
That's it.
Thank you, Senator, for a picture of Israel. Thank you.
Are you done with your closing?
I'm here to answer your questions.
Okay, any questions? Yes, Senator Vargas.
Hi. Thanks for being here. I just have one question. Why do you suppose, or do you know why Valmont doesn't want to develop this on their own? Why wouldn't they?
Well, we reached out. Yeah, we reached out to them in this process. I'm not saying they wouldn't develop it on their own, but with that partnership with the university, potentially with the state, with the Department of Agriculture, I think everyone sometimes looks at what's the best way to move something forward, and sometimes it's through a partnership.
So are they expressing an interest in it yet, or they just want to sit back and wait and see what happens?
Well, the idea that what we wanted to develop through this bill is, yes, they're definitely showing an interest.
Okay. I guess I just had some experience in a whole nother field where a physician had developed a drug, but there was no money in that drug. Would be broadly helpful, but since there was no money in it, they wouldn't develop it on their own. Is this kind of our effort to say it needs to be done, but there may be no private
sector is not going to come up with $1.5 million to match our last dollar in unless they believe there's something here.
Gotcha, that's the question I was wondering.
Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Wisher. So Senator McDonnell, say they develop something in a public-private partnership, and would the university get royalties from that, or would the Valmont or whoever did it own that?
I like how positive you are. We're already talking royalties. Yes, I think that would have to be agreed upon. And if you have that partnership, of course, I think in the past, both parties have agreed to that and done well off of it. So I think that would have to be agreed upon.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, any letters? No letters for the record. So that closes the hearing for LB 614.
Thank you.
And we will open the hearing for LB 755.
I had a good friend that worked for Army which was an Israeli irrigation company for 20 years. I basically ground from Napa, North Dakota, everywhere, basically selling their irrigation and water filtration systems.
Okay, Senator Vargas, ready for you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Oh, Chairman's back. Fellow members of the Appropriations Committee and Chairman Clements. And for the record, my name is Tony Vargas, Tony-Vargas. I represent District 7, which includes the communities of downtown and South Omaha. Today, I am bringing you LB 755, which would appropriate $75,000 to the Department of Labor to make the meatpacking industry worker rights coordinator a full-time position. You heard that right. That's $75,000. Not $750,000, not $7.5 million, $75,000. I handed out 2 sheets of paper, one of which is a one-pager, just for your reference, and the other, which I'll talk about, is just a little bit more about a recent news release from the U.S. Department of Labor. Currently, the Department of Labor has a part-time meatpacking industry worker rights coordinator position, which is appointed by the Commissioner of Labor. The position was originally created under Governor Johans and was designed to, quote, review practices and procedures, end quote, of the meatpacking industry with the purpose of assessing the fair treatment of workers. Now, the meatpacking coordinator is well positioned to connect workers to supportive resources. In 2022, The coordinator visited 50 meatpacking operations, interviewed more than 200 workers, helped several terminated employees be reinstated to their former position, and referred safety issues directly to OSHA. Now, increasing the coordinator's position from part-time to full-time will increase their capacity to do this important work and support workers in our state. The full-time meatpacking industry worker rights coordinator duties are outlined in statute 48-2213. The duties of the coordinator shall be to inspect and review the practices and procedures of meatpacking operations in the state of Nebraska as they relate to the provisions of the governor's Nebraska Meatpacking Industry Workers Bill of Rights. The coordinator and his or her designated representative shall have access to all meatpacking operations in the state of Nebraska at any time meatpacking products are being processed and industry workers are on the job. What I just described is already in state statute, is already law. This is what is existing and what we are statutorily obligated to follow through. What I appreciate our Commissioner Albin for following through. It's important to note that the coordinator shall also, on or before December 1st of each year, submit a report to the members of the legislature and the governor regarding any recommended actions the coordinator deems necessary or appropriate to provide for the fair treatment of workers in the meatpacking industry. This will serve as a critical tool for us as lawmakers to have a better understanding of what is going on in our packing plants. I encourage everybody, if you have or have not been able to visit our packing plants or any in your communities, I think it's a really important window into both. This is both a human problem and an economic problem, and we need to make sure that we are meeting both those sides of both businesses and workers. Over the last several years, we have heard an increasing number of concerning practices taking place in our meatpacking plants. Now in 2020, we heard firsthand for the first time from our meatpacking industry workers directly about what they were experiencing at work. During this hearing, we heard numerous concerns about their work conditions and environments, such as lack of investment and improvements to the plants, little ventilation or sanitation, and healthy and safety precautions. Now, OSHA data collaborates what we heard in 2020, and as I mentioned already, that the agency and the part-time worker also made visits. Now, that year, there were 2,726 work-related injuries and illnesses that were serious enough to cause workers to miss a collective 30,000, nearly 31,000 days of work. Most recently, we have been made aware of violations of child labor laws in our meatpacking plants. The Department of Labor reported 33 violations of child labor laws in Nebraska meatpacking plants. That is 33. And the article, a press release from the U.S. Department of Labor cited about 100 different cases across the country. 33 of those were in Nebraska. 33% of the cases are in our state. This is more than any other state. Upon learning about these concerns, the coordinator is well positioned, and our Department of Labor, to find the solutions by both coordinating with employers and, or when appropriate, making referrals to other labor agencies. It is incumbent upon us to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure our agencies are able to be not only meeting statutory requirements, but also are reacting to what we're seeing. And we can't turn a blind eye. And so that's why this bill is not telling the department what to do. It is providing the funding so that they can fully expend the duties that are already statutory obligated. And over the last several years, I've worked closely with workers at meatpacking plants across the state, their families, and different groups that have been advocating both for representing their interests of these workers and what I've heard about what is happening in these plants, not only the treatment of workers, the lack of follow through on implementing many of the safety and health measures, and oftentimes we've also heard misinformation spread across the state that everything is fine. What I'm here to tell you is whether or not it is or is not fine, we've had too many data points or too many articles showing that there are things that are not fine. We need to make sure that workers are safe. We need to make sure that this industry is successful and thrives. Both things are absolutely necessary and are needed, and it's one of the reasons why we have an obligation to do more. Now, unfortunately, we didn't pass on that bill that I referenced, and that's why this bill, which would fully fund this position, is extremely important. This coordinator will serve as an important resource to thousands of Nebraskans working in the meat and poultry plants by providing them important information and referrals and responses to questions and concerns. And in a large state like Nebraska with plants, many hours and thousands of workers, they need a full-time meatpacking plant coordinator, as you can imagine, one for this entire state. With that, I'll be happy to answer your questions. The last thing I'll just say is, please read more into this. We have what you've heard not only from our commissioner and on all the things that we do with unemployment and many other aspects, this lives within this as well. What I want to make sure is that we are giving the resources, and in this instance, I consider extremely meager resources, to make sure that we can be competitive and either bring on a part-time coordinator that we currently have as full-time, or potentially fund a full-time coordinator position solely to do this work, because it is clearly needed. The data that we're seeing here on the 100 children illegally employed in hazardous jobs, and 35 plus of those in our state, is something that we need to address. And we're not talking about penalties. What we're talking about is making sure there's a line of sight. There's somebody that can operate and coordinate as a resource so that these things don't happen again. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Appreciate you very much.
Senator Urquhart?
Thank you, Senator Clements. So, Senator Vargas, do you know the number of animals slaughtered or processing plants? How do we rank with other states? Do we have more processing plants and slaughter more animals in other states?
We have more processing plants. I don't know in terms of how we rank in terms of all the states, but we're definitely in the top 10% in terms of the number of processing plants we have. That's true.
So that
relative
could be
to
the
some,
reason why we have more, what do you say, claims or issues than other states. If we have 33%, we may have a vast majority of the most animals slaughtered or processing plants.
So we have a lot more processing plants also in Iowa and Arkansas. And I will tell you, some of these states don't have any violations at all, even though they might have somewhat comparable mountain of plants that we do.
Do they have an inspector?
Some of these actually do have inspectors, yeah. Some of these have different agencies, yeah.
This part-time inspector, who pays for him now? What's that cost?
That's a question I'll make sure to follow up, but I believe it was around, the reason why we wrapped at 75,000 was we wanted to make sure we were being inclusive of what we anticipated the coordinator position right now. It's a half-time position, half-time FTE, so approximately $36,000 is what.
The 75 is a half-time position?
No, this is a full-time position, 75.
Does that include travel and PSL, the whole thing?
If we need to make sure to include PSL, we'll include that PSL and includes reimbursement for travel. But that already exists with the part-time coordinator, some funding for that.
And we've had this part-time coordinator since 14, you say?
And the industry's grown significantly, right? So there's a reason just to, even with the growth of the industry, put aside, and I don't like saying put aside, there have been things that should never have happened within the meatpacking plant industry. Clearly what we're seeing here, since this has grown, maybe we also need to make sure we're growing our staff along with it.
Thank you.
Senator McDonnell?
Thank you, Senator Vargas, for bringing this bill. With the stats that you have, do you think one full-time position is enough?
I mean, honestly, I think this is a bigger question on let's make it a full-time position so we have the actual funds behind one person doing this full-time. And let's see what that actually can get us. You know, we've seen some of our different agencies, you know, that come here, smaller agencies are able to do a lot with little individuals. Again, this is meant to be proactive. Like, you know, this individual isn't going in trying to seek out like violations. That's not the intent of the goal. It is to support workers. That's the reason why that Bill of Rights existed. So it's also to be proactive so these things don't end up ever happening. You know, if we're looking to potentially better fund this, we could go for more, but I wanted to be prudent and say, let's make it a full-time position. Just think about the number of half-time FTEs where we came for different agencies. And the first question we had is, like, why not make it a full-time so that we can we can make sure that we're doing our actual due diligence on different agencies and different work required by statute. So,
Thank you.
Senator,
Oh, go ahead, you go first. I was
Senator
checking it
Dorn.
out here quick.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Do you know, I mean, been reading articles about this here or whatever. Do you know our workers' right, meat packers industry workers' right coordinator? He just, I mean, does he take complaints from people, or is he, when something happens, then he goes and checks it? And I guess what I'm getting to is the federal labor, when they look at stuff, this is based on somebody filing something.
Yeah.
Because they're not here actively being in the state otherwise.
yes, yeah. We're talking about OSHA's, that this is filing for violations. This is an enforcement mechanism. There will be people testifying to speak a little bit more about this, but the other intention behind this is when I was first bringing legislation way back during COVID times, not way back, but at that time, we had heard that the coordinator position was stretched because it was halftime and it was doing other roles in addition outside of on meatpacking plant side, and wasn't able to do as many visits to sites, which prompted, well, if we have a full-time dedicated individual doing this, then we can make sure that they're proactively doing the work to make sure that there is a connection and a voice on behalf of workers and the industry, so that we're getting ahead of potential wrongdoings, but also making sure the industry is successful on the worker side.
Senator Gilbert.
Yeah, you had referenced, and I apologize, I didn't write it down, but there was you had a number of, and it was illnesses and injuries. And then was that for a specific time frame? And what was that number?
2,700 work-related injuries and about 31,000 days of work missed as a result of those.
And it wasn't, I thought you said illnesses
This is
and injuries.
data collaborates from OSHA.
Pardon?
This is data from OSHA.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Senator Ramirez.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, for being here. Would this be in addition to the part-time, or would it replace the part-time? And if it replaces, would we expect the part-time dollars to go back in general fund to support this?
My intent is to fund a full-time coordinator position for this. If we want to put in writing that we're specifically funding a full-time position, we find out what that exactly is, what it currently is in terms of the part-time position, I'm happy to make that language and amend it so that we can put it in the budget bill.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Are there any other proponents for LB 755?
Good afternoon. My name is Nick Grangenet. That's spelled NickGrandGenett. I'm a staff attorney with Nebraska Appleseed, testifying in support of LB 755. So I want to start my testimony with just a couple of quotes from workers who wanted to be here today but couldn't be. So these are people who are meatpacking workers. They came as like refugees to our state. So the first individual said, "When I worked in a meatpacking company, I had to forget that I was human. I was always afraid to say anything because companies have armies of lawyers on their side and many workers do not understand their rights." Another worker, in reference to the complexity between OSHA, wage and hour, and workers' comp, said, "It's difficult to know who to report to for what, and then to find time is almost impossible." LB 755 is a bill that puts one full-time employee and adds support to meat and poultry workers across the state of Nebraska. It does so by appropriating funding to ensure the state's meatpacking coordinator is a full-time rather than a part-time position. Driven by an unrelenting workforce that requires people to make between 20,000 and 100,000 motions per shift, the meat and poultry industries continue to be among the most dangerous and exploitative in the United States. As Senator Vargas said, in 2020, there were 2,726 work-related injuries and illnesses in the state's meatpacking industry. These injuries and illnesses combined were serious enough to cause 30,822 days of missed work. Industry exploitation was further illustrated by the COVID-19 pandemic, which disproportionately impacted meat and poultry workers, and the recent wage and hour investigation, which determined that a third-party cleaning crew was employing minors between the ages of 14 and 17. So appropriating funds to allow the meatpacking coordinator to operate as a full-time position is a meaningful, modest step the legislature can take to ensure the industry's poor health and safety track record is amended. The coordinator position was created in 2005 to support immigrant workers guaranteed certain protections under our state's non-English speaking Workers Protection Act. The Act's central purpose is just to ensure that meatpacking workers who are frequently recruited from long distances, often in Latin America, have access to certain translation and transportation rights when they arrive in the state. The Act's original sponsors found these workers were recruited based on misrepresentations regarding the type of work, working conditions, and hours and wages they could expect. So along with these translation and transportation rights, the meatpacking coordinator position was, as Senator Vargas said, created to review the practices and procedures of our state's meatpacking industry. Our staff and other organizations have always seen the immense utility and dedication of people serving in the meatpacking coordinator position. That dedication was certainly evident this past year in 2022, where in addition to conducting several site visits and interviewing over 200 workers, they were able to help several wrongfully terminated employees be reinstated to the position after coordinating with the Human Resources Department at these meatpacking plants. Additionally, given the coordinator's frequent interactions with meatpacking workers, they are uniquely positioned to help workers refer labor-related disputes to the appropriate labor enforcement agency. And this is important because many workers don't necessarily realize that the state of Nebraska doesn't necessarily have the jurisdiction to address like health and safety issues. It's only like OSHA and the federal government that can do that. Since the coordinator is usually a labor law specialist within the Department of Labor, they have to split their time between work that is meatpacking specific and other more general related labor work. So by making this position full-time, LB 755 builds on a demonstrable pattern of success that creates greater capacity to engage in this meatpacking specific work. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Senator Erdman? Thank you, Senator Clements. So do you know if these workers that are foreign workers, are they H-2A workers?
I think they come over on a variety of visas. Some have green cards, some are work authorized through asylum, refugees. So I think H-2A is primarily for ag workers.
Say that again.
I think the H-2A visas, those are primarily for ag workers, but I know like H-1B, refugees, asylees often get hired by these plants.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Other proponents for LB 755? Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Maria Arriaga, spelled M-A-R-I-A. Arriaga, A-R-R-I-A-G-A. And I am the new Executive Director of the Nebraska Latin American Commission, and I'm testifying in favor of LB 755. First of all, I want to thank Senator Vargas and Senator Brandt to introducing this legislation that is so prevalent in our state today. And I would like to be in saying that this testimony is given in my capacity as Executive Director of the Latin American Commission, but also as an immigrant and also as a foreign worker in a packing plant. So these three conditions make me not only notice the importance of having a person in charge of a guard of the rights of meatpacking workers, but also at the same time, I take it as a very personal issue. My mother, many of my family members, and close friends are or have been workers in a meatpacking plant, and today I feel the duty to use my voice to speak for them. The stories about frequent injuries, hazardous working conditions, discrimination, harassment in the workplace are constant. And I'm not saying this just because someone told me, but because I've been witness of these situations. Unfortunately, the problem has not improved as desired, despite the complaints and reports of these situations. The lack of action in these problems is because, unfortunately, all these workers, mostly Latinos and Hispanics, continue to be treated as a second-class citizens. Just imagine doing the same job repeatedly, nonstop, clock second speed, for more than 10 hours every day in a negative temperatures, which is what happened in the processing plants. And still having to deal with the lack of supported resources. If you want to report a situation that is affecting you in the work, either physical, psychological, labor-related, etc., and not knowing where or to whom to turn, who to trust you, without fear or retaliation consequences. And I think having a full-time bilingual worker rights coordinator will lay the foundations for a real and honest effort to try to improve working conditions and the general well-being of meatpacking workers. I will say it as simple as it is. Being able to express yourself and communicate in your own language, especially when it comes to a complaint, a situation that is already difficult and cumbersome. Knowing that there is a person to whom you can go directly without fear, without intermediaries, with a certainty that is your support and with whom you can trust, is definitely a step forward to the well-being of these workers who are one of the most powerful labor force of Nebraska. And I will put this in a perspective. Around 30,000 Nebraska workers, meatpacking workers, many of whom they are immigrants, had to work in the meatpacking plants across the state from Dakota City, Omaha, Crete, Grand Island, Lexington. That is just to mention a few cities. Meatpacking workers' injuries and illnesses were on a steady decline for 2014-2019, but saw a significant spike in 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic. But even years when the rate was decreasing, it was still one of the most dangerous industries in the U.S. rates are per 100 full-time workers. And I include a graphic that you can see from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you can see clearly the disparities in terms of dangerousness between a regular job in whatever other field and the job in the meat industry in any of the variants. The U.S. Department of Labor is investigating the illegal use of children working dangerous jobs at meatpacking and slaughtering facilities in at least three states and perhaps more. One of the states, Nebraska, and I want to answer the Senator Ehrman question. He's not here, but I want to answer anyways. When he said that, yeah, probably it's the states where are more packing plants and probably are there where they have more cattle or whatever. And we are not going to be comparing because we have more, because we have one of the biggest ones in the country. We are saying this because this should happen. It doesn't matter the size of how many packing plants do you have. It should happen. That's it. And this situation was happening when they were hiring children between 13 and 17 years old that were doing this kind of extremely dangerous jobs with extremely dangerous tools. And they couldn't even communicate because of the language barrier. And let alone report that they were being exposed to completely illegal situations. How they can express that they were in an illegal situation if they can even communicate and they're still performing these jobs. It's incredibly something super important to take into account when we are talking to have this full-time meatpacking industry worker rights coordinator. Coordinator will show a commendable effort on the part of the state government and the legislatures to start working and improving this very important matter. I believe that an industry worth billions, as is the meatpacking industry, billions of dollars a year, thanks to the workers, deserve someone to fight for them. To work for the safety and the well-being. And I stress the preponderance of the meatpacking industry worker rights coordinator, and I urge you to advance this bill to the general file. And appreciate your time. Thank you. Do you have any questions? I'm sorry.
From the committee? Senator Dover?
Yeah. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
In the graph here that you have here, is this physical injuries? Is this COVID? What exactly, how would those break out?
Oh, but it's basically showing as I say it here, the disparity in the dangerousness level between a regular job and the different type of jobs in the meat industry field. So as you can see, every color is a different type of job, every time activity, and the last one, the orange ones, is all the private industry. And for example, the rendering meat byproduct processing is 10.7%, and it's still in 2020 was 7% in comparison with 2.7 in whatever other field. And it's a full report. You go directly to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Lee Enterprises graphic. I just use the graphic because it shows the difference between one and another. But it's like a very extensive study.
So I guess my question is, it shows that for 2014 to 2019, that there's been less and less of what this graph relates.
Yeah. But
then the spike in 2020, is that due to COVID illness?
Yes.
Okay.
It's COVID and yeah, mostly COVID. So what happened, and I can say this because again, my mom works in a packing plant. Is a lot of the times they have to show up to work regardless of if they will showing any symptom or not. So like you are coughing, yes, but you are not coughing that bad, so you can still come.
Okay.
And that person is still spreading that, probably another person is going to have more consequences. But you know, it's like this treatment of they don't know the language, they don't know the law, they're not going to say anything, and this situation keep happening and spreading. That's why we need someone in full-time too. In full-time, the other question was like a full-time position will be enough? Probably not. But I mean, at least to have a full-time as a president will show us how we can move forward to improve the situation.
Are there other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there other proponents for LB 755?
Good afternoon. My name is Rose Godinez, spelled ROSEGODINEZ, and I am testifying on behalf of the ACLU of Nebraska in favor of LB 755. Our sincerest gratitude to Senator Vargas for introducing this measure. This bill, while seemingly just an amount of money, represents an important measure to ensure meatpacking workers have a safe workplace and that the state complies with its duties as laid out in the Nebraska Meatpacking Bill of Rights. As you may recall, the ACLU of Nebraska filed a lawsuit against a meatpacking plant during the height of the pandemic. And I can tell you both as an attorney that previously represented meatpacking workers and from my personal capacity, my parents are former meatpacking workers and I have countless relatives in the plants currently, that the conditions that came up or arose during the pandemic are not new. They were just exacerbated by the pandemic. And they remain to this day with little to no oversight by the state. At the time, we filed complaints with the Department of Labor. Nothing was done. And then we also learned later by the reader, the Department of Labor had the Meatpacking Bill of Rights coordinator spend 97% of her time on processing unemployment claims during the height of the pandemic. Which clearly showed the priorities that the Department of Labor were not focused on workers. And by making this a position full-time, we hope that those priorities would change. While talking to meatpacking workers during the COVID pandemic, workers reported injuries in which the plants would simply ignore them or tell them to go back to work. We also heard quite a bit about providing inadequate medical care. So I've heard of head injuries or burns and all they're provided is a Tylenol. And then you add to that the retaliation and the harassment that workers go through and this industry is plagued with. And you're left with companies that prioritize profit over people. And just recently, as you've heard from Senator Vargas and Maria, there were child labor law violations. And while unsurprising, I hope it serves as an alarm for you to do all you can to increase oversight of the issues in meatpacking plants, including at the very, very least, making this Meatpacking Bill of Rights coordinator position a full-time position. For those reasons, we urge the committee to advance this bill to general file.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there additional proponents for LB 755? Welcome.
Howdy. Howdy, y'all. My name is Andrew Farias. That is ANDREWFARIAS, and I'm the Policy Fellow with the Asian Community and Cultural Center here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And we are testifying today in support of LB 755. If you're not familiar with the Asian Community and Cultural Center, we're a nonprofit organization that supports and empowers all refugees and immigrants through our programs and services. At the same time, we strive to advance the sharing of Asian culture and every cultural heritage of our clients with the community at large. In 2022, we served 1,735 clients from over 36 nationalities and 31 native languages in a variety of capacities ranging from youth services to domestic violence programming. This includes individuals who came to the United States and those who are born here as well. So that can include those that are second and third generation immigrants, but also those who have escaped religious persecution, ethnic cleansing, and war. So these are folks that have come to Nebraska who are seeking better lives for themselves and their families. At the Asian Center, we have clients who come from a wide variety of backgrounds, spanning dozens of nationalities, including Vietnamese, Chinese, Korean, Latina, Sudanese, Middle Eastern, Yazidi, Afghan, Ukrainian, and so many more. Many of the populations that we serve also work in meatpacking plants across the state, with some of our closest communities being here in Crete. We support new Americans in their quest to gain employment in Nebraska, and this can include education around their rights as workers. However, we also recognize that individuals may not fully understand their workers' rights, which can be attributed to language barriers, lack of proper training, or fear of retribution. Speaking specifically about clients who work in meatpacking plants, they have expressed concern about working extensive hours, experienced unsafe working conditions, encountered mistreatment, and some now have lifelong injuries too that will impact them into the future. So we believe it is vital to have a dedicated position that can really track and report these problems while also reassuring workers of their rights. Our organization sees tremendous opportunity in the ability of having a meatpacking industry worker rights coordinator that is full-time, that will be able to dedicate these additional resources to ensuring safety and fair employment for all workers. By increasing the position to full-time, the legislature, for example, would be able to create additional capacity for the coordinator to track and report critical employment information for the legislature, the governor, and other policymakers. And this increased capacity can lead to better utilization of public available OSHA injury data, just like previous testifiers have mentioned, and likewise the improvement of industry transparency by elaborating on the racial, ethnic, and linguistic makeup of the meatpacking industry through their annual report, which can also ensure that workers have access to adequate translation and transportation services. So in short, this information helps direct service providers like the Asian Center to better support the communities that we serve. Nebraska's meatpacking plant workers can endure some incredibly challenging working conditions, and they really deserve the support that this full-time position could offer. Therefore, we are urging the committee to advance LB 755 to General 5. Thank you all for your time.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Are there other proponents for LB 755? Are there any opponents for LB 755? Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Chairman Clements, members of the Appropriations Committee, for the record, my name is John Albin, John Albin, and I'm the Commissioner of Labor, and I come here today in opposition to LB 755. The Nebraska Department of Labor appreciates the intent behind LB 755, but there's simply not a workload need to justify making the meatpacking industry workers' rights coordinator a full-time position. I'll skip the next parts. I thought maybe it was in offer, LB 755 was offered to support LB 405. It's not, so I'll skip over that. Under our current structure, the Nebraska Department of Labor has a labor standards unit within the Safety Division. This unit's responsible for many worker protection laws, including but not limited to the Wage Payment Collection Act, Employee Classification Act, Contractor Registration Act, and the Meatpacking Industry Workers' Bill of Rights. Our meatpacking rights coordinator splits almost all of our time between meatpacking and wage payment duties. There's inherent overlap between these worker protection programs. In 2022, our teammate visited all meatpacking facilities in Nebraska with more than 100 employees. A total of 50 in-person visits to facilities across the state were accomplished in 2022, from Gordon to South Sioux City and to Pawnee City and all places in between. While visiting the meatpacking facilities has value, multiple visits to compliant facilities does not. Establishing a presence within the community is critical. Our teammate successfully does this and continues to place more focus on outreach. For 2023, one of her goals is to educate local workforce offices on the meatpacking industry workers' bill of rights. This way, all complaints received are directed to us for proper investigation. To date, only 4 meatpacking complaints of any kind have been received in 2023. That's simply not full-time work. All calls and inquiries regarding any violations of programs within the jurisdiction of our Labor Standards Division related to a meatpacking facility are worked by our Meatpacking Workers' Rights Coordinator. This gives her the ability to get streamlined results for the workers. She has a working relationship with the facilities, has direct access to the right people, and gets timely responses. In speaking with our teammate, making this position full-time will be detrimental to the role. She's extremely passionate about the work she does and loves helping the workers in this industry. However, some of the most help she can do comes from working in other areas. While she regularly makes referrals to partner agencies such as USDOL or the NAOC as appropriate, for areas within NDOL's jurisdiction, she's able to directly resolve the conflict and ensure future compliance. For example, in 2022, she worked 195 wage complaints. 95 were related to the meatpacking industry. She was able to recover wages for impacted employees ranging from $22.50 to $120,000. The key highlight of her year was working with meatpacking facilities to reinstate 5 employees. Because of her work, 5 workers got their job back. This type of work would be hindered without her extensive knowledge and continued focus on all labor standards areas and be a disservice to meatpacking workers. And just as a note, I know there's been a mention of the children that were affected or that were working in the meatpacking plants. But those children, as I understand it and everything I have seen, were not employees of the meatpacking plant, but rather an independent contractor. So it's questionable whether even if this bill was to pass and the position was to be full-time, the Meatpacking Workers' Rights Coordinator would have any authority to deal with an entity that's contracting with a meatpacking operation to come in and do services. So for these reasons, NDOL opposes the increase in general funds. This concludes my testimony, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Senator Over.
Yeah, thank you for coming, Commissioner Albin. Is the part-time, or is your employee, are they bilingual?
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Senator Clements. So, Commissioner Albin, so then this person is part-time doing this job, but she does other jobs as well. So she's a full-time FTE?
Yes, she is a full-time employee of the department. She splits her time about half and half between the meatpacking coordinator duties and other duties such as wage payment collections.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Wisher.
Thank you, Director, for being here. So when an incident like what has happened recently, where there's a discovery of children being employed in Nebraska at these facilities, when an incident like this happens, what is the responsibility of your department in addressing that? Or is this just a federal issue?
It's not a federal issue because the ages of those children were actually criminal violations in Nebraska as well. Because under 14 without is just forbidden. Generally in those cases though, we will turn to partner with USDOL. And in fact, we did work with USDOL on this case. USDOL was the primary, but we did assist to some extent in that. But we usually refer those cases on to the federal jurisdiction because the federal penalties are so much larger than ours. And so generally we would refer one of the, we do our preliminary investigation, make sure the child is out of harm's way, and would also make a referral off to USDOL.
Okay, and then is there discussion and in plans to implement a system that would be able to catch something like this at an earlier stage?
Yes, I mean, the problem is, as I understand it, from what I know about the case, is that there were a lot of forged documents. Now, someone looking at that, a 13-year-old, usually probably going to tell that they're really not of age. But there was a lot of forged documents that were in place, and so it makes it difficult, as in any case, where you're operating with forged documents. Obviously, we'll be paying a little closer, putting a little closer eye out when we are in the facilities to look at ages of workers. But the problem, as I understand it, was largely because of the use of forged documents, or at least that's what we're told.
Okay. Then my last question is, with this revelation of children working interstate illegally, why not take advantage of the opportunity for a full-time staff person who could help to do this work to ensure this is prevented in the future?
Well, we're already in all the plants every year anyway of any size. I mean, it's like any piece of legislation, we will, even if we didn't ask for it, if we get the law or the statute has changed, we will enforce it and make that extra effort. I mean, the legislature tells us that there has to be a full-time working meat packers coordinator. We will make sure that they're out there and giving valuable service to the state. So it's not like if it's there, we wouldn't take it, but we're talking, the child cases, that was mostly nighttime work. So then it creates a substantial, second time we've got to send someone out to the plants because you need, the primary focus has always been the workers during the day. So then it's going to be a second visit to the plant. I assume in the middle of the night because that's when the cleaning is going on in those facilities. And even then, as we found with our unemployment program, the forgers are getting a lot better than they used to be. And just the ability to examine documents and say, yeah, that document's obviously false, because, looking at people, you can't just say, okay, that person is definitely not 14 or 15. Well, if they were that of underage, they couldn't be working those hours anyway, because it's after hours for both state and federal, under both state and federal law. So those middle of the nights were double violations. Not only were they too young, but they were working out of hours that they could ever be legally working.
Other questions? Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Thank you for coming back again. About how many people in your department, and I call it, have the type of people that we're talking about here in packing plants, but are also, I call it, in the rest of the labor force, because you have surely other complaints from other types of businesses or other entities. How many people work in that?
We have 10 labor law specialists, I believe is the number right now, who are full-time in wage payment complaints, contractor registration, Employee Classification Act, and then the one that splits time between the meat packing rights coordinator and her wage payment and collection duties.
So when we had the, I call it the COVID issue at the packing plants, out of those 10 there, you didn't have just that halftime person, I call it, looking at those situations. You brought some of those others over also?
Well, the pandemic brought on a lot of issues because, one, they were urging everyone not to go into facilities because they didn't want somebody bringing COVID in the early days. In particular, nobody knew who was carrying, and the symptoms and entomology was all really an unknown at that point. So there was a strong urging of people not to enter into plants or places they didn't have to go, absolutely have to go. The second thing was with the COVID, that was clearly covered by OSHA, and in both the Trump and the Biden administrations, there were heavy fines levied against employers for violating COVID safety standards. So the safety standards issue has been preempted by the federal OSHA laws. I mean, we can go in, we do make referrals out if we see violations, but it's primarily a federal issue, the safety issues.
Thank you.
Senator McDonnell?
Thank you for being here with the testimony, with the statistics, with the shift work. I just don't see how a person part-time can effectively do this job. And I'd like to sit with you, and if you're willing to go through some of this information, because this isn't matching up. And it's not just the testimony that we're hearing today. It's a testimony that we get phone calls on. We get the personal stories, the people that want to stop by our office and tell us what's going on. It's something's missing here. And I'd like just to sit with you and go through some things, if you're available in the next 2 days, and get deeper into this.
Yeah, I'd be glad to sit down with you and bring in our people from the that do the meatpacking work and the supervisors in that area. Be glad to sit down with you and discuss it.
I appreciate that.
Senator Armendariz?
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Want to go back to Senator Wishart's comments and you explaining that these documents are getting further advanced. Would you suggest you need somebody that can audit those documents better to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future? Or how would you suggest that we do tackle that if it's a document problem? Would your department be in charge of doing that, or do you already have people that do that?
To some extent, we look at documents even now in the sense that within the unemployment program, we require proof of identity, which includes an examination of usually driver's license and other issues. That's a very technical area. I mean, we're back 100 years ago when I was a young attorney trying a forgery case back out in Nance County. And we had two great experts, one from the State Patrol and one from my client, and they looked at the same documents and got totally different reads on the authenticity of the signature or who actually executed the signature was the deal in that case. That really requires almost the State Patrol type. I mean, State Patrol would have the expertise to do that. That's their bailiwick in terms of investigations. I don't think it would be an appropriate area for us to get into in terms of examining those documents. That would be my thought.
So my husband's great-grandfather was killed in a packing plant injury, and I understand the severe danger. And for a child to possibly be exposed to that, how do we curtail that? If you're saying that it's forged documents, then we really need to look at making sure that children are not getting in and working these dangerous jobs.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the problem is if you go into that, you'd almost have to do a process where all documents for all workers have to get examined somewhere at a state or federal level before the worker could even start there. And that doesn't happen now, whether it's going to work at the grocery store when my 14-year-old kids start sacking groceries down at Russ's B&R. Russ's did require them to come in and provide their certificate of birth so that they could feel comfortable that Rachel was in fact 14 at that point. But unless you come up with an auditing system where you audit every pre-employment, the scofflaws are going to try it. And it's just, but yeah, again, it's just out of our area of expertise and what we can do in terms of examining documents. That would have to be something to be run through the state patrol. I don't know, childcare workers, I think, are fingerprinted, and that goes through the State Patrol. State Patrol would have that expertise. The Department of Labor definitely would not.
Other questions? I had one, Senator Vargas gave us this Department of Labor report, and there's a department, evidently the U.S. Department of Labor found this employment violation. Are they in these packing plants inspecting, or also besides your worker?
Almost all of the plants will be at least subject to OSHA investigations. It'd also be subject to anything by Wage Now, USDOL Wage Now, or USDOL's child labor provisions. So yeah, they're all subject to federal oversight as well as state oversight.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there any other opponents on LB 755? Is there anyone here in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, Senator Vargas, you're welcome to close.
Thank you very much. I think part of the part of the frustration that we hear from workers, and we've heard from workers. So for those of you who have been in this committee in the past, we've had workers come and testify on hearings, send letters, and this was obviously during COVID-19 times, but as was mentioned by some previous testifiers, or even from Senator Armendariz as well, the conditions in the plants are difficult even before pre-COVID-19 times. This industry is growing in our state and has been growing. This is a part of the fabric of our state. Nobody is talking about whether or not we should be shutting down operations. What we're talking about is what Governor Johans put into law at that time, which is creating a meatpacking plant bill of rights. It's already in law. What OSHA is doing is largely enforcing on violations. This meatpacking bill of rights that exists is meant to be proactive. The right to adequate facilities and the opportunity to use them, the right to understand information, the right to existing state and federal benefits and rights, the right to be free of discrimination, for continuing training and training of supervisors, the right to seek state help. There's a discrepancy from what we just heard from the commissioner and what we're hearing from workers or from people advocating on behalf of workers. If the commission is seeking to exist and is going to operate on what they currently have, I understand that. But what we clearly see are incidents that require more investigation. To the question that Senator Wishart brought up, my hope is that a full-time coordinator that's a labor law specialist would come with a recommendation on a potential process improvements that should be had to make sure something like this egregious 100 children illegally employed never happens again. That we don't rely on civil or criminal penalties from the Department of Labor and a judgment that comes down on whether or not children are working in our plants that are illegally working. That we're proactively creating not only the community, the connections, and the resources in place. That's what this is about. I think what we also heard the commissioner say is that if they have it, they will follow through on it. We have a responsibility to react to some of these numbers. And we could easily create a more extension legislative program. But I think what the most important thing about this is we're talking about whether or not we have somebody that can dedicate their full-time efforts just on this. We heard the word that it will be detrimental. I do not understand how this can be detrimental to the work of the commission if that individual is solely able to be really proactive and be in the different meatpacking plants more often than they are, so that people are more educated on their rights, so that we don't have workplace violations, so we don't have deaths, we don't have illnesses as much as possible, because that's going to be good on the bottom line for the employer and good for the safety of employees. This is not about whether or not we're creating necessarily more government. This is about enforcing and improving on what the standards are of this Bill of Rights, not what OSHA is doing. I just wanted to make that clear for the record, clear for this committee, because I think what we heard is, at least from the commissioner, we're not going to do more than what's expected of us because I already have my staff at capacity. And I'm not going to seek out more instances of work for this, or because we're already at the capacity where we currently have. Somebody's at a halftime and is serving a halftime for some other position. We need to do something. We can go down the route of really legislating, creating an entire new act, or we could say, let's create a full-time coordinator position, let them do more of their job and follow through on what Governor Johans put into place years ago and improve the coordinator position's capacity to do more.
Senator Wishart?
Thank you, Senator Vargas. Just two follow-up questions. The director mentioned that one of the concerns may be that the scope of this individual's jurisdiction, and that in the case of the children in Nebraska, it may have been through contracted companies. Would you be open to looking into being able to amend that scope so it could cover those
Yes.
jurisdictions as well. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and the way that I'm reading this, the duties of the coordinator, this is the language, the duties of the coordinator shall be to inspect and review the practices and procedures of meatpacking operations in the state of Nebraska as they relate to the Workers' Bill of Rights. This is not saying that they're not able to do that. This is within the purview. If we have to make it clearer that it's within the purview of this position to do that, it is. What we are required to do by statute is the coordinator is supposed to submit a report of recommended actions. Why are there not recommended actions on follow-up from this, or any of the workplace violations, or the missed days? If we have somebody with a full-time capacity, they would be able to follow through on that. So I'm happy to work on language that will get to making sure they can do that work that you just mentioned.
Okay, and then the second question I have is, I would imagine in a situation like what we're going through now with the violation of child labor laws, and it was addressed today that the state is going to be taking on some of the investigation and action on this. Can your office provide us just an approximate of what the type of cost to taxpayers is for violations that end up in us having to go through a court process? I think that would be helpful as we're weighing this decision.
Yes, yes, we can.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Vargas. That will conclude the hearing on LB 755. Except for position comments, for the record, we have received 9 proponents, no opponents, no neutral comments. And now we are concluded with LB 755. Thank you.
Conclude for the day.
It's helpful when she sits right by us.
It's